The bustling streets of Los Angeles were filled with the usual noise of honking cars, the distant chatter of pedestrians, and the occasional screech of tires. It was just another day in the City of Angels, until, unexpectedly, everything stopped. Elon Musk, the founder of Tesla and SpaceX, was on his way to a crucial meeting with investors. His motorcade, a sleek procession of black Tesla Model S sedans, moved swiftly through the city, cutting through the midday traffic with ease. The world had grown accustomed to seeing him move at the speed of light. After all, when you're the richest man in the world, time is more valuable than gold. But today, something was different. Something was about to happen that no one could have predicted. As Elon sat in the back of his Tesla Model S, his mind raced through the to-do list for the day: another big meeting with SpaceX engineers about their upcoming Mars mission, a press conference about the new Tesla battery technology, and a private discussion with a group of investors looking to back his next big project. It was the kind of day that demanded his full attention. His phone buzzed incessantly, but Elon was used to that. He was used to the constant barrage of notifications, the pressure to keep moving forward, always innovating, always advancing. Then it happened. The motorcade came to a sudden, screeching halt. The sound of rubber meeting asphalt echoed through the cars behind him. The driver of Elon's car glanced nervously at the rearview mirror before turning to him. "Mr. Musk, there's something in the road," he said, his voice laced with uncertainty. Elon raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, something?" he asked, his tone incredulous. Was it a pedestrian, an animal, or just another traffic jam? Either way, it didn't matter. They were on a strict timeline. But before the driver could respond, Elon noticed something. A figure. A young girl, no older than 16 or 17, was sitting on the curb, a cardboard sign in her hands. She had the look of someone who had been through far too much in her short life. Her clothes were ragged, her hair tangled in a mess of dirt and dust. But it was the look in her eyes that caught Elon's attention. It wasn't fear. It wasn't sadness, even though both were there. It was something else. Something that made his heart stop for a moment. It was a look of waiting. Waiting for someone to notice. Waiting for something to change. Elon stared at her, completely taken aback. The girl was sitting on the ground, a simple sign in front of her: "Lost everything, need help." For a moment, the world around him disappeared. The cars honked. The driver muttered something about needing to move forward. But none of it mattered. He couldn't look away from her. The motorcade, the investors, the billion-dollar companies, all of that faded into the background. The world's richest man, the man who could literally send rockets to Mars, was stopped by one girl sitting on the curb. "Stop the car," Elon said, his voice low, almost as if he was unsure of his own words. The driver glanced nervously at him through the rearview mirror. "Mr. Musk, we can't. I said stop the car." There was something in Elon's voice that left no room for argument. The car came to a halt, and before the driver could even put the vehicle in park, Elon had opened the door. The paparazzi, who had been tailing the motorcade, instantly saw the change. They were quick to react, cameras clicking in rapid succession. The world would soon know what was happening, but none of them understood what was going on in Elon's mind. They just knew that something big was unfolding. Elon stepped out of the car and approached the girl. At first, she didn't look up. Her head was down, her eyes fixed on the pavement, her hands clutching the cardboard sign like it was the only thing holding her together. Elon stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. Was he really going to do this? Was he really about to get involved in something as messy as this? The world was watching, and yet, none of that seemed to matter. He knelt down beside her, his knee hitting the rough concrete of the sidewalk. His voice was soft, but firm. "Hey," he said, "what's your name?" The girl lifted her head, her eyes meeting his. There was a moment of silence, just enough for him to see the years of struggle in her gaze. She swallowed hard before speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lily," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Elon," he replied, offering her a small, reassuring smile, though it was clear she wasn't in the mood for smiles. The awkwardness of the moment hung in the air for a beat, the sounds of the city humming around them like a distant soundtrack. But Elon was fixated on her. "What happened?" he asked gently, trying to break the ice. Lily didn't respond immediately. She stared at the sign in her lap, her fingers tracing the edge of the cardboard. "I lost everything," she said after a long pause. "Family, friends. I don't know how to fix it. And I don't know if I ever will." Elon was silent for a moment. Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had heard stories like this before, sure. He had read the statistics, seen the documentaries. But hearing it from a person, seeing it in her eyes, was different. He took a deep breath. "Do you have a place to stay tonight?" Lily shook her head. "I sleep in a shelter sometimes." But, her voice trailed off. She didn't finish her sentence, but the meaning was clear. The shelters weren't enough. They weren't a solution. They were just a temporary fix. Elon sat with her for a while, his mind racing. The world was still waiting for him to get back into his car, continue with his day, follow the schedule, the plan. But the plan was gone. There was no going back. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not his meeting with the investors. Not the future of Tesla. Nothing. The people around him had always seen Elon Musk as a man who solved problems. He invented electric cars. He made space travel possible. He built the future. But in this moment, he realized that all his technology, all his billions, didn't mean a thing if he couldn't help the people who needed it most. Elon looked up at the crowd gathering around them, the cameras flashing. He didn't care about them anymore. His thoughts were focused solely on Lily. "You don't have to do this alone," Elon said, standing up and offering her his hand. "I can help you." And just like that, the world would change. But no one knew it yet. "Do you believe in second chances, Lily?" he asked. Her eyes widened slightly, and for the first time, she nodded. The world would soon witness something far more powerful than any rocket launch or electric vehicle. It would witness the beginning of a new mission, a mission that would alter the course of lives, including Elon Musk's own. This moment, small and seemingly insignificant, was only the beginning of something much bigger than anyone could have imagined. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk was not the man many people imagined when they thought of a billionaire. The public saw him as a larger-than-life tech mogul, a visionary with a reputation for revolutionizing industries. He had built Tesla, SpaceX, and countless other ventures from the ground up, accumulating wealth and fame in ways that few ever dreamed of. Yet, behind the sharp suits and the headlines, there was a story that few people knew, one that shaped who he was and why he felt compelled to help others in the first place. Elon's childhood wasn't one of privilege, at least not in the way most people imagined. He was born in Pretoria, South Africa, in 1971, to a Canadian mother, May, and a South African father, Errol. His parents were both highly intelligent, though their marriage was tumultuous and ultimately ended in divorce when Elon was just 9 years old. While his mother was nurturing, his father, a man of intense ambition and complex emotions, was often distant and hard to please. From a young age, Elon showed a natural aptitude for technology. He was fascinated by computers and engineering, teaching himself to code when he was just a child. But despite his early interests and achievements, his home life wasn't easy. He often felt alone, misunderstood, and disconnected from the world around him. His father's harsh words and high expectations weighed heavily on him, and though Elon excelled academically, he struggled to find acceptance at school. The bullying and isolation he faced left emotional scars that would persist throughout his life. In his early teens, Elon developed an almost obsessive focus on the future. While most of his peers were concerned with video games or sports, he found solace in books about space and science fiction. His obsession with technology was coupled with a deep, almost spiritual desire to change the world. He didn't just want to build things, he wanted to reshape the future. He was convinced that technology, space exploration, and renewable energy were the keys to solving humanity's greatest challenges. As a teenager, Elon moved to Canada to live with his mother. He enrolled at Queen's University, hoping to escape his father's influence and find a path that suited him. After 2 years at Queen's, he transferred to the University of Pennsylvania in the United States, where he earned degrees in both economics and physics. It was during these years that he began to hone his entrepreneurial skills, launching ventures that were ahead of their time. In 1995, Elon dropped out of a PhD program at Stanford University after just 2 days, choosing instead to pursue business opportunities in Silicon Valley. It was here that his first major breakthrough came. He co-founded Zip2, an online city guide, which he later sold for nearly $300 million. This was the start of his meteoric rise. He used the proceeds from Zip2 to found X.com, an online payment company, which eventually became PayPal. PayPal was acquired by eBay for $1.5 billion in 2002, making Elon an overnight billionaire. However, while Elon's financial success skyrocketed, his personal life remained tumultuous. He had been married twice, and both relationships had ended in painful divorces. The long hours he spent building his companies left him little time for meaningful connections, and the weight of his responsibilities often caused him to spiral into periods of deep loneliness. Despite this, Elon's desire to make a positive impact on the world only grew. His interest in space exploration, in particular, became an all-consuming passion. In 2002, he founded SpaceX with the goal of making space travel affordable and accessible, with the ultimate vision of colonizing Mars. But it wasn't just about Mars. He believed that the survival of humanity depended on becoming a multiplanetary species. Elon's relentless drive to innovate and solve complex problems made him a polarizing figure. His ambition was limitless, but so were the criticisms. Some hailed him as a genius, others saw him as a reckless dreamer with an ego too large for his own good. Despite the criticisms, he never wavered. He threw himself into his work, focusing on Tesla, SpaceX, and other ventures. In his mind, there was always more to be done, more lives to be impacted, more systems to be changed. But as much as Elon believed in the power of technology to shape the future, a part of him was haunted by the lessons of his own childhood. The feeling of being overlooked, the pain of watching people suffer without a way to help, they were experiences that had shaped his understanding of the world and what it meant to be truly successful. It wasn't until he met Lily that these feelings resurfaced in a way that he couldn't ignore. Lily wasn't just another face in the crowd. She was a reminder of everything that Elon had witnessed in his own life, the forgotten people, the ones left behind. The ones with no safety net, no one to help them pick up the pieces. For Elon, this moment of recognition was pivotal. He had spent his life building companies that could send rockets to space, but he had never focused on the people who needed help on Earth. The irony wasn't lost on him. As a man who had created technologies that could change the world, he had failed to address the issues right in front of him. As Elon sat in his Tesla, staring out at the street where Lily had sat just moments before, he felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He had been so focused on building his empire, on sending humanity to the stars, that he had forgotten the most basic of human connections. This wasn't just a moment of chance, he realized. It was a sign. The same world that had created him, the world of technology, innovation, and opportunity, was the very world that had left so many others behind. The girl sitting on the curb was a product of that world. A world that valued progress, but often overlooked the human cost of that progress. Elon knew, in that moment, that something needed to change. Not just in the way he ran his companies, but in the way he saw the world. He couldn't ignore the issues of homelessness, poverty, and inequality anymore, not when he had the means to do something about it. But what could he do? The answer was simple: he would start by helping Lily. But even as he made that decision, he knew that this would be just the beginning. He couldn't stop there. There was more work to be done. And, as always, Elon Musk was ready for the challenge. Elon Musk didn't act on impulse, or at least, he never thought of himself as someone who did. He was known for his calculated, data-driven decisions. But when it came to helping Lily, something inside him broke the rules of logic and planning. The moment they locked eyes, it was as though the universe had pulled the emergency brake on his life. The next few days felt like a blur. Elon had made a decision, to help Lily, to get her out of the life she had fallen into. But as with any big decision in his life, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was a larger force at play. The inner voice that pushed him to make space travel possible, to change the world with electric cars, now urged him to tackle something closer to home, something he had been avoiding for too long. The deep societal issues, the roots of inequality that many had accepted as part of the fabric of the world. Lily's situation was a stark reminder of those harsh realities. She wasn't just one homeless girl, she was a symbol of millions of people around the world who had fallen through the cracks of an increasingly disconnected society. This wasn't a moment of charity, this was a call to action. Elon's team quickly organized a meeting to discuss how they could help. He was already used to working under pressure, but this was different. He wasn't making decisions to accelerate electric vehicles or increase rocket launches. He was working to make someone's life better, to actually change the course of a human being's future. The stakes felt higher than they ever had before. The room was filled with Tesla executives, SpaceX engineers, and a few members of the social outreach teams. They were all looking at him, waiting for direction, as he sat across from them at a long glass table. There was an urgency in the air, but there was also uncertainty. How does someone like Elon Musk, an innovator, a disruptor, go about solving homelessness? And why would he, of all people, care? I want to start by helping Lily, Elon said, his voice steady, but his eyes were filled with determination. But this isn't just about one girl. This is about a system that has failed too many people. We're going to change that. And we're going to start with a real, tangible solution. He paused, allowing the words to settle in the room. What do we need? Elon asked, cutting straight to the point. Where do we begin? One of the social outreach coordinators, a woman named Rachel, spoke up. We've been working on this for years, Elon. But there's no one-size-fits-all solution. We need to address housing, job training, education, and mental health. We need partners who are willing to think outside the box, who can bring in the right technologies and resources to help people break free from the cycle of homelessness. Elon nodded, his mind racing. He had never been one to back down from a challenge, but this was different from launching the next big tech product. This wasn't about the bottom line, this was about human lives. And Lily? Elon asked. Rachel hesitated before speaking. She's not the only one who needs help. You can give her a place to stay, a job, but the real challenge is finding sustainable, long-term solutions. The shelters are overcrowded, the mental health resources are stretched thin, and finding affordable housing in places like Los Angeles is nearly impossible. Elon leaned back in his chair, his hands folded together. His thoughts were turning over rapidly, trying to find the angle, the solution. Then, something clicked. Technology, he said suddenly. We use technology to change the future, to disrupt industries. Why can't we apply the same principles here? Why can't we disrupt the system that's failing people like Lily? A murmur rippled through the room as people began to process the idea. Elon's reputation for shaking up the status quo was well known, but this was an entirely different field. This wasn't about software or machines, it was about people. Still, the vision that had made him a billionaire in the tech world was pushing him forward. We'll use data, machine learning, and automation to find the most effective ways to get people off the streets and into permanent housing, Elon continued. We'll use Tesla's AI expertise to create personalized solutions for each person based on their needs, their skills, and their backgrounds. And we'll partner with organizations that are already working in the field to make this happen. It wasn't just about providing a shelter or a temporary fix. Elon was thinking bigger. He wanted to reframe the issue entirely. It was clear to him that the existing systems weren't designed to truly help people get back on their feet. They were designed to manage the problem, not to solve it. The team nodded, absorbing his vision. But there was a hitch. Elon, Rachel said, her tone cautious, this will take time. It won't happen overnight. You're talking about building infrastructure, creating partnerships, and finding a way to scale the solution. And even if we have all the right technology and resources, it's still going to be a huge challenge to convince people to change the way they think about homelessness. Elon looked at her, his gaze sharp. I know it's a huge challenge, he said. But it's a challenge we can't ignore anymore. We can't just keep doing the same thing over and over and expect different results. If we don't try, we're just part of the problem. The tension in the room grew as people realized the scale of what Elon was proposing. This wasn't just a feel-good project. This was an all-in commitment to solving one of society's deepest issues. But the road ahead was uncertain, and the risks were high. At that moment, Elon's phone buzzed. It was a message from his PR team: there's a growing media storm around your interaction with Lily. The press is calling it a PR stunt. They want answers. Elon didn't flinch. He had dealt with criticism his entire career. The press could say what they wanted. But he knew this wasn't a stunt. He had seen Lily's eyes. He had seen the desperation, the hopelessness. He couldn't turn away. I don't care what the press says, Elon said firmly. This is about something bigger than any of us. I'm in. And I want everyone else in this room to be in too. Let's disrupt this system. The energy in the room shifted. What had started as a small conversation about helping one person had now evolved into a full-scale initiative, an initiative that would challenge everything Elon had ever known about social responsibility. It was a journey that would test his beliefs, his resources, and his resolve. But Elon Musk wasn't one to back down from a challenge. And this, he realized, was his most important challenge yet. The media frenzy surrounding Elon's decision to stop his Tesla motorcade for Lily only intensified in the days that followed. News outlets, social media, and even late-night talk shows buzzed with speculation. Was Elon Musk just performing a publicity stunt? Or had he genuinely had a change of heart? Elon knew that the attention was inevitable. His name alone could bring media storm clouds. But he wasn't concerned with the headlines. The real challenge lay in the journey ahead, the mission to create a sustainable solution for homelessness. It wasn't about the cameras or the clicks. It was about action. It was about changing the lives of people like Lily and, by extension, countless others who lived in the shadows of society's neglect. He called a meeting with his key team members, but this time, the focus was different. They weren't just talking about technology or business strategies. This was about something far more human. The system is broken, Elon began, pacing in front of the conference room table. Homelessness isn't just an issue of finding housing. It's deeper than that. It's about mental health, addiction, joblessness, and society's refusal to truly understand the problem. We need to address it in a way that no one else has. We're going to use everything at our disposal to change how the world deals with homelessness. The room fell silent. His team had witnessed his drive to push the boundaries of technology, but this was different. There were no clear metrics to measure success or failure. The task before them wasn't one of building rockets or cars, it was about solving a crisis that had plagued communities for decades. Elon turned to Rachel, the social outreach coordinator who had been his main point of contact since the first meeting. What's the first step? Rachel took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. We need to start by assessing the situation on the ground. We can't solve homelessness in a vacuum. We need to understand the different needs of those affected, their backgrounds, their challenges. That's the only way to build a sustainable solution. Elon nodded. Let's go to the streets. We'll meet the people who are living this reality. No more talking. We need to understand them. Within days, Elon and his core team visited local homeless shelters, outreach centers, and even spent time in neighborhoods where homelessness was most prevalent. The experience was eye-opening for everyone involved. They saw the faces of people who had been forgotten, men and women who had fallen into cycles of poverty, abuse, and addiction. But it was also where they encountered stories of resilience, of people who still had hope, even in the face of unimaginable hardship. Elon spoke with a man named Robert, who had lived on the streets for over a decade. Robert had once been a skilled mechanic but had lost his job after a series of unfortunate events. He had a family that he loved, but addiction had torn them apart. He had been in and out of rehabilitation centers, but every time he tried to get back on his feet, something would knock him down again. I don't know what it is, Robert said, looking down at his hands. I just can't seem to break free from this cycle. I keep trying, but nothing works. And every time I fail, I lose a little more of myself. Elon listened intently, feeling a deep sense of empathy for the man. He knew that Robert's situation wasn't unique. Every person he met had their own story, their own battles. The problem was far more complicated than he had initially imagined. This can't be fixed with just a roof over your head, Elon said, his voice softer than usual. It's about rebuilding lives from the inside out. Rachel added, it's about providing the support systems, mental health services, addiction treatment, job training, and yes, housing. But it's also about creating a culture of opportunity and dignity. The next few months were a whirlwind of planning, coordinating, and building partnerships with local organizations and mental health professionals. Elon's team worked tirelessly, but as the project began to take shape, they realized just how deep the challenges were. Tesla's resources were helpful in providing technology for shelters, using AI to match people with appropriate services and helping create a more efficient process for intake and placement. SpaceX engineers worked on building modular homes that could be quickly set up in areas where affordable housing was scarce. Musk's network of contacts helped secure grants and philanthropic contributions from people who had supported him in the past. But the technology alone wasn't enough. They needed to address the root causes. Homelessness wasn't just an economic issue. It was a systemic issue, deeply intertwined with mental health, addiction, and the lack of support for people who were slipping through the cracks. Every time Elon felt the weight of the enormity of the task, he thought back to that moment when he saw Lily sitting on the curb. He thought about the look in her eyes, how she didn't even know where to turn for help. But what disturbed him more than anything was the fact that she had been invisible to everyone else. That realization hit him hard. There were millions of people just like her, forgotten by society, left to fend for themselves. And yet, so many people, many of them wealthy and powerful, turned a blind eye, as if it wasn't their problem to solve. He couldn't turn away now. The team started organizing pilot programs in Los Angeles, where homelessness was particularly rampant. Elon personally visited the locations, sitting with the people who were affected by the crisis. He listened to their stories, shared meals with them, and even volunteered at shelters. His hands-on approach became a driving force for the project. His personal involvement became a symbol that change was not only possible but necessary. But the deeper they went into the heart of the issue, the more obstacles they faced. Local governments resisted the scale of the changes Elon and his team were proposing. Bureaucratic red tape, budget limitations, and entrenched political interests created hurdles at every turn. Elon wasn't used to hearing no. He wasn't used to seeing his grand ideas being shut down. But this was a different kind of fight. It wasn't about selling cars or rockets. It was about shifting the mindset of an entire system, and that was something far more difficult. During one of the meetings with a city council, Elon found himself face to face with a politician who dismissed his plans outright. "You're thinking too big, Musk," the politician said, leaning back in his chair with an air of indifference. "Homelessness is a complex issue. You can't fix it by throwing money or technology at it. It's not that simple." Elon's eyes narrowed. "Then let me make it simple for you. People are suffering. And if you're not willing to do something about it, then you have no place in this conversation." He stood up, and his voice rang with quiet authority. "We're going to do this. No matter how many obstacles get in our way." As Elon Musk walked out of that meeting, he knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long, and the obstacles would be many. But he wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. And with that, Elon Musk's most ambitious journey began, to prove that with the right mindset, technology, and determination, no problem was too big to tackle. He had set out to help one girl, but in doing so, he was about to change the course of an entire industry, and in turn, the future of homelessness in America. The project was gaining momentum. Elon Musk and his team had put everything they had into reshaping the homelessness crisis, and yet, the deeper they dug, the more overwhelming the task became. Each victory was followed by setbacks, each step forward met with unexpected resistance. But no matter how difficult things got, Elon kept pushing. He couldn't stop. The faces of the people he met, the eyes of the homeless he saw every day, those were the faces that fueled him. But then, one evening, something happened that shook him to his core. It was an early Friday morning when Elon and his team gathered at a new shelter in downtown Los Angeles, a facility designed with Tesla's solar-powered, energy-efficient systems to provide a sustainable living environment for those in need. It was one of the first projects that had come to fruition, and it symbolized a significant breakthrough. They had spent months preparing for this moment, and there was a sense of anticipation in the air. The team had invited the media to witness what they hoped would be the future of homelessness solutions. Elon was walking through the facility when a phone call came in. It was Rachel. Her voice was shaking, even through the phone. "Elon," she said, "it's Lily. She's gone missing." His heart stopped. His mind raced. Lily, the very reason this all began, had been in and out of the shelter program for the past few weeks, receiving therapy and working on job placement. She had seemed to be making progress. Elon had been keeping a close eye on her, determined to see her through to the other side. But now, she was gone. "What do you mean, gone?" Elon asked, his voice tight. "We've checked everywhere. She's not in her room, not at the local shelters we work with. We've asked around, but no one's seen her," Rachel said, panic evident in her tone. "We think she may have gone back to the streets. After everything she's been through, I don't know how she could have disappeared like this." Elon's heart sank. He felt like the world had collapsed beneath him. Everything they had been working for, the technology, the partnerships, the ideas, seemed irrelevant now. None of it mattered if they couldn't save Lily. He didn't think twice. Within minutes, Elon had his car keys in hand. He told his team he was leaving. Rachel tried to talk him out of it, to remind him that it was important to stay on task, but Elon wasn't listening. He wasn't a man who could just sit by while someone who had trusted him slipped through the cracks. The drive to the city's toughest neighborhoods felt like it lasted an eternity. He could feel his pulse racing as the familiar streets of downtown Los Angeles stretched out before him. Elon had seen these areas before, cramped alleyways, people huddled under tarps, the sharp scent of desperation in the air. It was a world he was learning to understand, but one that had always felt distant to him. This time, however, it felt personal. Lily was somewhere out there, and he would find her. He knew that searching the streets wasn't a simple task, and he didn't expect to find her quickly. But he couldn't stop. For the first time in his life, he felt the weight of his success and his failures collide in an overwhelming wave. The pressure of changing an entire system, the expectations of his employees, the media storm swirling around him, all of it felt small compared to the possibility that he might lose Lily forever. He spent hours driving through the streets, talking to homeless individuals, asking anyone if they had seen a girl with long, dark hair, dressed in worn clothing. He offered a small reward, but no one seemed to know where she had gone. As the sun began to set, Elon found himself at a shelter near the outskirts of the city. He had been here earlier that day, but it had been closed when he first arrived. Now, something in his gut told him to try again. As he pulled into the parking lot, he saw a familiar face, a volunteer who had been helping with the shelter's operations. Elon rolled down his window. "Have you seen a young girl named Lily?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The volunteer's face softened, and she nodded slowly. "She was here last night," the woman said. "She was upset, but she didn't want to talk to anyone. We tried to offer her a place to stay, but she refused. She said she couldn't trust anyone anymore." Elon's chest tightened. He could see the girl in his mind, her fragile hope, her broken spirit. He didn't want to lose her. Not like this. "Do you know where she went?" Elon asked, his urgency rising. "She mentioned something about going back to the park," the volunteer said, her voice tinged with sadness. "I'm afraid she'll be back out on the streets again." Without a second thought, Elon sped off toward the park, his heart racing. He was more determined than ever to find her, to make sure that she didn't fall through the cracks again. As he pulled into the park's dimly lit parking lot, he spotted a figure sitting on a bench, hunched over, her face obscured by a hood. It was Lily. Elon's breath caught in his throat. She hadn't seen him yet, but he recognized her immediately. Without hesitation, he stepped out of the car and walked toward her. "Lily," he called softly, his voice shaky with emotion. She looked up, her eyes red from crying. She seemed surprised to see him but didn't move. Her body was tense, as if she were bracing for something terrible to happen. "Why are you out here?" Elon asked, sitting down beside her. His voice cracked, but he forced himself to stay calm. "You don't have to be alone anymore. We can help you. You don't have to run." Lily shook her head. "I can't trust anyone anymore," she whispered. "I thought you were different. But you're all just the same. You can't fix me. You can't fix all of this." Her words cut deep, but Elon wasn't backing down. He reached out gently, placing his hand on hers. It wasn't the grand gestures he had made in the past, nor the strategies or technologies he had been developing, it was just a simple, human connection. "I'm not going anywhere, Lily," he said quietly. "I'm here to help you, no matter what." For the first time since their first meeting, Lily's walls seemed to crack. She looked at him, and for a moment, there was something in her eyes, a flicker of hope, of recognition. But it was fleeting. Still, it was enough. And in that moment, Elon realized something. They weren't just fighting to change a system, they were fighting for the individual, for the people who had been forgotten. The journey ahead would be difficult, but it wasn't just about solving a societal problem. It was about saving lives, one person at a time. Elon wasn't ready to give up on Lily. And he wasn't going to give up on anyone who was struggling to find their way out of the darkness. The next few weeks felt like a blur. Elon didn't let go of his determination, not for a second. He didn't just want to help Lily, he wanted to ensure that the work they were doing, creating sustainable shelters, offering job training, providing access to mental health care, would be something that could reach every person who needed it. Lily's journey was a personal wake-up call, but the broader crisis required real, systemic change. The first step was making sure Lily was safe. After that night in the park, Elon made it a priority to meet with her every day. He wasn't just talking to her about the shelter or the resources they could offer, he was trying to understand her. Lily didn't open up easily, but over time, she began to trust him. They would walk through the new facilities together, and Elon listened as she shared her story, how she ended up on the streets, how the world seemed so indifferent to her suffering. She spoke of the people who had let her down, the systems that had failed her, and the overwhelming sense of helplessness she carried every day. But she also spoke of something else, hope. There were moments when she would catch herself, almost embarrassed, when she realized she was thinking about a future again. A future where she had control. A future where she had a choice. Through every conversation, Elon learned more about the cracks in the system and the strength of the human spirit. He could see it in Lily's eyes. She wanted to believe, but the weight of past disappointments made it hard. She had spent years fighting just to survive, and now, she was afraid to trust anyone, even those who genuinely wanted to help. As the weeks passed, Elon worked with his team to ensure that the shelter program was truly tailored to each individual. They would not just offer a roof and a meal, they would offer counseling, education, and long-term mentorship. Every aspect of the program was customized to meet people where they were emotionally and physically. Elon's focus on technology became secondary to the need for human connection, and he invested in counselors, social workers, and peer mentors who could guide people like Lily through the difficult steps of reintegration. In one of their meetings, Rachel spoke up, her voice full of hope. "We've seen the first successful transformation. One of the residents we worked with for the last few months just found a job. She's moving into one of our modular homes next week. It's working, Elon. We're making a real difference." Elon smiled, the pressure lifting ever so slightly from his shoulders. "That's just the beginning. We need to scale this up, make sure it's not a fluke. We need to give people like her the tools to stay on track, to feel like they have a future again." But even as they celebrated these small victories, Elon knew they had only scratched the surface. The problem was far too big, far too complex, and it couldn't be solved overnight. The media, while initially supportive of his efforts, began to grow impatient. They wanted results, they wanted metrics, and they wanted change now. They didn't understand that homelessness wasn't an issue that could be quantified by numbers alone. It was a deeply human issue that required empathy, time, and a new way of thinking about society's role in taking care of its most vulnerable citizens. As the weeks turned into months, the media narrative began to shift. Instead of questioning his motives, reporters started to admire his persistence. People began to see that Elon wasn't just a businessman trying to check off a charitable initiative from his list, he was a man committed to seeing this through, despite the obstacles, despite the criticism. And through it all, Elon kept showing up, not as a tech mogul or a billionaire, but as a person trying to make the world a better place, starting with the lives of people like Lily. And Lily? Her journey was slow, but it was real. She found work at a local cafe, thanks to the job training program that Elon had helped implement. She was learning to trust again, not just Elon, but herself. The pain that had held her captive for so long still lingered, but she was no longer defined by it. For the first time in a long while, she was beginning to build something new, her own future. One evening, as the sun was setting, Elon sat down with Lily at a park bench near the shelter. The air was warm, the faint hum of the city in the distance, but for a brief moment, everything felt calm. "You're doing it, you know," Elon said softly. "You're getting back on your feet." Lily looked at him, her eyes clear but tired. "I don't think I would have made it this far without you." Elon shook his head. "No, Lily. You made it this far. All I did was make sure you had the tools to keep going." They both sat in silence for a while, watching the world around them. It was in moments like this, moments of connection, that Elon realized just how powerful a small act of kindness could be. It wasn't about changing the world overnight. It was about showing up, being there for people when they needed it most. As Lily walked away, heading back to her new job, Elon's thoughts turned inward. The journey they had started wasn't over. It was just beginning. He had only touched the surface of a much larger problem, but now he had a clear vision. The path ahead would be long, and there would be many more people like Lily who needed help. The stakes were high, and the pressure was immense. But one thing was certain, Elon would not stop. He had seen too much, the pain, the resilience, and the possibility of change. For every person he helped, for every life he touched, there was something worth fighting for. The world may not have been ready to solve homelessness, but Elon Musk wasn't going to wait for anyone. The fight was on, and it was a fight he was determined to win. And as he looked back toward the horizon, he realized that the road to change didn't need to be walked alone. It would take an army of people, each contributing what they could, to make the world a better place. But as long as people like Lily had a chance to rebuild their lives, Elon believed there was hope. The real victory was in the future that could be shaped, one small step at a time. In the weeks that followed, Elon Musk threw himself into the homeless initiative with renewed vigor. Every day, he walked through the shelters, met with residents, spoke with social workers, and visited community leaders. He made sure to stay connected, constantly checking in with everyone involved, listening to their feedback, and adjusting his approach where necessary. One evening, as he was leaving a community center in downtown Los Angeles, Elon found himself deep in thought. The progress was slow, but real. The world had already been so quick to judge his initiative, but he knew it would take time. More importantly, he knew that real change wasn't about immediate headlines, it was about transforming lives. His eyes wandered to the street as he saw a group of people huddled together, sharing a meal. They laughed quietly, despite their circumstances. There, in those small moments of connection, Elon saw the true power of humanity. It was a reminder of what they were all working toward, a better future for those who had nothing. That evening, he sat in his office, surrounded by maps of the city, plans for new shelters, and the blueprints for solar-powered modular homes. The project had grown significantly. What started as a modest pilot project had expanded to more cities across the United States, and even beyond. Tesla, SpaceX, and the various companies that Elon led had embraced the vision, not just for their technological potential, but for the difference they could make in the lives of people who had been forgotten. But it wasn't just Elon who was driving this change. It was the collective efforts of the entire team, from his engineers and designers to the outreach workers and counselors. It was the people like Rachel, who had dedicated their time to helping others, that made the vision a reality. They weren't just building shelters, they were building hope. And then, something unexpected happened. It was a Friday morning when Elon received a phone call that would change everything. The voice on the other end was one he hadn't heard in months. It was from the mayor of Los Angeles, a man with whom Elon had worked closely in the past, but their relationship had soured over the years. Political differences and differing priorities had made them more adversaries than allies. Elon, the mayor said, his tone gruff, but with an air of acknowledgement. I've been following your work with the homeless initiative. And I think it's time we have a conversation. Elon raised an eyebrow, unsure where this was going. What kind of conversation? He asked cautiously. I've heard the complaints about the shelters, about how they're not doing enough, not reaching enough people. But I've also seen the results. People are getting jobs. Families are staying together. And while I can't promise everything will be perfect, I think it's time we work together on a larger scale, the mayor said. Elon was quiet for a moment. This was a breakthrough he hadn't anticipated. The mayor had been a vocal critic of his approach, arguing that technology alone couldn't solve the issue. Yet now, here he was, acknowledging the success of the project. It was a sign of things shifting in a major way. Let's talk, Elon finally replied. But it has to be about long-term solutions, not short-term fixes. They agreed to meet the following week. As the conversation ended, Elon felt a mixture of emotions. He had always believed in the power of collaboration, and yet, he had grown skeptical of the political world's willingness to take action on real problems. But this was different. This was a sign that, perhaps, the world was starting to catch up with the vision he had for the future. In the days that followed, the plans for collaboration took shape. Elon met with city officials, community organizers, and local businesses to discuss how they could pool resources to expand the initiative. The goal wasn't just to provide temporary relief but to create a long-term solution, a new kind of community that integrated technology, mental health support, job training, and a sustainable environment. This was the future Elon envisioned, and now, he had the support of a city government that was willing to invest in it. But as the talks progressed, Elon found himself at a crossroads. He knew the risks. Politicians had their own agendas, and the wheels of government moved slowly. Would they truly follow through? Or would this become just another promise lost in bureaucracy? He couldn't afford to wait around and see. Elon understood better than anyone the importance of speed when it came to creating change. If they were going to make this work, it had to be done right, and it had to be done now. With the momentum building, Elon knew that this could be the tipping point, the moment when things would change for good. The meeting with the mayor happened just as scheduled. The city hall was buzzing with activity as Elon walked into the room, joined by Rachel and a few key members of his team. They sat at the table with the mayor and his advisors, along with several other influential community leaders. Elon had spent years navigating high-pressure meetings, but this one felt different. It wasn't about technology or business strategy, it was about human lives. "I've seen what your team has done," the mayor began, his eyes locked on Elon. "And I'm impressed. You're changing the game, Elon. But we need to do this at a scale that we've never seen before. I'm willing to make it happen, but we need your help. We need your resources, your vision." Elon sat back in his chair, listening carefully. This wasn't just a request for a partnership, it was an invitation to truly change the landscape of homelessness in the city. "You're right," Elon said after a long pause. "But we need more than just resources. We need commitment. We need every department in the city to align, to work together with the same goal. We're not just building shelters, we're building lives. It will take time, patience, and a willingness to embrace the long-term solution." The mayor nodded, his expression serious. "I understand. But I believe this is something worth fighting for." It was the beginning of something much bigger than any of them had anticipated. Elon left the meeting feeling a mixture of exhaustion and optimism. The road ahead would be long, and the challenges would be immense. But for the first time in a while, he felt like they were on the verge of something transformative. As he walked out of City Hall, the sun was setting, casting a warm glow across the city. He looked at the skyline, and for a moment, he thought about how far they had come. The journey was far from over, but they were on the right track. For the first time in years, Elon felt hopeful, not just for the project, but for the people it was meant to help. The battle wasn't won, but it was only just beginning. And in the silence of that moment, Elon Musk realized something that had always driven him: true change wasn't about solving problems. It was about empowering people to solve their own. In the weeks following Elon's meeting with the mayor, the momentum of the initiative continued to grow. What had started as a simple act of compassion for one individual, a homeless girl named Lily, had become a full-scale movement. The program that Elon had envisioned was taking shape, and it was beginning to spread beyond Los Angeles, touching cities across the country. Elon's daily life was now a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and strategy sessions. Tesla's engineers were busy designing new sustainable housing options that could be quickly deployed across different cities, while SpaceX's teams were collaborating on integrating space-age technology to create more efficient, cost-effective solutions. It was a massive undertaking, but Elon was relentless. He wasn't just trying to solve homelessness, he was determined to revolutionize the way society approached the issue, and he wasn't going to let anything stand in his way. It wasn't just the technology that was shifting, attitudes were changing too. Elon's initiative had drawn attention not only from the public but from other corporate leaders, some of whom had previously shown little interest in social causes. Seeing the impact of Elon's work, several billionaires reached out, asking how they could get involved. This newfound willingness to contribute didn't go unnoticed by the media either. What had started as a local story about a billionaire helping a homeless girl was now a global movement, garnering praise from unexpected corners. But with this newfound attention came new challenges. The spotlight on Elon and his project grew brighter, and so did the pressure to deliver. Critics began to ask tough questions. How scalable was the model? Could it be replicated in other countries? Was Elon Musk's vision truly sustainable, or was it just another flash in the pan? Elon knew these questions were coming. He had prepared for them. After all, he had been questioned for much of his career. Tesla was once dismissed as a pipe dream, and SpaceX was considered a foolish attempt to privatize space exploration. But Elon had always been driven by the belief that the impossible was only impossible until someone figured out how to make it happen. And that same drive was what fueled his homeless initiative. In the midst of the growing scrutiny, one of Elon's biggest supporters, Rachel, reminded him of the importance of keeping the human side of the story at the forefront. She'd been there with him from the start, and now, as they sat in the conference room planning their next moves, her voice was calm but firm. "Elon, don't let the critics distract you," she said. "You've already changed lives. Look at Lily. Look at how far she's come. This is bigger than numbers and projections, it's about the people." Rachel was right. Elon had seen the proof himself. He had watched people like Lily transition from the brink of despair to rebuilding their lives. He had met countless others who had found purpose again, who were working hard to turn their lives around with the resources the initiative provided. But Elon couldn't help but feel the weight of the critics' words. The pressure to succeed, to prove that this project wasn't just a short-term solution, was immense. He knew they needed to expand rapidly if they were going to make a dent in the systemic problem of homelessness, but how could he ensure that their success wasn't just a fleeting moment? It was that question that led him to an idea: a summit. A gathering of the brightest minds in technology, business, philanthropy, and government to discuss solutions for homelessness. This summit wouldn't just be about him or his initiative, it would be about creating a new framework for how society could address these deep-rooted issues. Elon knew that if he could rally enough influential people, he could set the stage for a long-lasting, global impact. The planning for the summit took months, but when the day finally arrived, the atmosphere was electric. Business tycoons, social activists, scientists, and policymakers filled the conference hall in San Francisco. The event was streamed live to millions around the world, as Elon took the stage to kick things off. "This isn't just a conversation about charity," Elon began. "This is a conversation about empowerment. It's about creating a system where people are not just given a handout, but given the tools to rebuild their lives. We're not just trying to solve homelessness, we're trying to end it. And we can't do that alone. This is about all of us coming together." The room erupted in applause. Elon's words resonated with so many in the audience, especially those who had been skeptical at first. They had heard the stories, they had seen the results, but now, in that room, they were ready to take action. Throughout the summit, a range of experts and speakers shared their insights and proposals. Government leaders discussed changes in policy that would support housing-first initiatives. Social entrepreneurs presented innovative solutions for mental health care, substance abuse recovery, and job placement programs. There were discussions about the role of technology in creating smarter, more sustainable cities. But perhaps the most important part of the summit was when a group of formerly homeless individuals took the stage. They shared their stories of transformation, how they had gone from living on the streets to working in stable jobs, thanks to the resources and mentorship they had received. Their stories were powerful, real, and raw. It was in that moment that the entire room understood, homelessness wasn't just a problem for the homeless. It was a problem for all of society. And if everyone worked together, they could end it. As the summit came to a close, the energy in the room was palpable. Elon could feel the shift, the tipping point that he had been working toward was finally happening. People were no longer looking at him as just a businessman, they were seeing him as a leader of a movement. The summit had sparked something bigger than Elon ever anticipated. In the days following the summit, companies and organizations began to announce their support. A major tech company pledged to donate a percentage of their profits to fund mental health programs for the homeless. A large construction firm committed to building more affordable housing across the country. The federal government announced new funding for cities that were adopting the housing first model. Elon knew this was only the beginning. The road ahead would be filled with obstacles, but now, he had an army of supporters. Together, they would change the course of history. They would rewrite the narrative of homelessness, not as a problem to be managed, but as a challenge to be solved. And as the sun set over the Bay Area that evening, Elon felt something he hadn't in a long time: hope. For the first time in years, he truly believed that a better future was possible, not just for the people who had nothing, but for all of humanity. Months had passed since the summit, and the changes that Elon Musk had hoped for were beginning to materialize. There was palpable excitement in the air as cities across the country began implementing parts of the initiative. New shelters were opening, innovative job programs were being launched, and community involvement reached new levels. But despite the progress, one thing remained clear: they had yet to face the real test. The first true test came sooner than anyone expected. It happened in San Francisco, a city that had been one of the earliest adopters of the new model. The initiative had launched a new type of housing, solar-powered, mobile homes that could be set up on vacant plots of land, offering quick shelter for those in need. These homes were designed to be temporary yet comfortable, with a focus on stability and privacy for individuals or families. They could be placed in areas that were previously uninhabitable, transforming underused or abandoned spaces into vibrant communities. Everything seemed to be going well. The first few months of the program had been successful. People were moving into the homes, finding work, and getting the support they needed. But as the program expanded, one unexpected challenge emerged: not all of the people moving into the shelters were ready for the stability that was being offered. Many were struggling with addiction, mental health issues, or a lack of life skills that made the transition to independence difficult. It was a challenge Elon had anticipated, but seeing it firsthand was something entirely different. One particular case stood out. A man named James had been living in one of the modular homes for a few months. He had been homeless for years, and while he seemed to be getting his life together initially, things started to unravel. The support systems in place were supposed to offer assistance, but James didn't seem to respond well to any of it. He had trouble keeping a job, was often absent from therapy sessions, and showed up to community meetings only sporadically. As time passed, the other residents of the community began to notice, and tensions started to rise. People were beginning to wonder whether the initiative was truly capable of helping everyone, or whether it was just another band-aid solution. Elon got word of James's situation one evening, as he sat in his office reviewing progress reports. He had heard the complaints about James, and although he didn't yet know the full details, something about the case struck him. He understood that this was a complex issue. He knew it wasn't just about providing shelter or jobs. The real challenge was the deeper, emotional scars that came with years of homelessness, addiction, and trauma. The next morning, he flew to San Francisco to visit the site. He wanted to see the situation for himself and figure out what they could do to make things better. The moment he arrived, he went straight to the community center where the residents gathered for meals and support groups. The atmosphere was tense, and it was clear that James's struggles had cast a shadow over the entire program. When Elon entered the center, he saw James sitting in the corner, isolated from the rest of the group. He was older than Elon had imagined, his face hardened by the years he'd spent on the streets. Elon sat down next to him, but James didn't immediately acknowledge him. "You're James, right?" Elon said, trying to break the silence. James looked up, his eyes wary. "Yeah. That's me. What's it to you?" "I'm Elon Musk," Elon said, offering a hand. "I've heard about your situation," and I wanted to come talk." James hesitated before shaking Elon's hand, still clearly unsure of his motives. "I don't need your help," he muttered. Elon nodded, not taken aback. "I get it. You don't need help, but I want to understand what's really going on. I don't think this is about the shelter, or the job programs. I think it's something deeper. You've been through a lot, and I'm here to listen." There was a long pause as James stared down at the table. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and filled with emotion. "I've been on my own for too long. I don't know how to trust people anymore. I don't know how to ask for help. Every time I get close to something good, it all falls apart." Elon listened quietly, giving James the space to talk. It was clear that the man was broken, not by lack of opportunity, but by years of feeling invisible, of being let down by the system. For James, the world had offered him very little in the way of kindness, and now that help was available, he didn't know how to accept it. "You don't have to do this alone," Elon said gently. "No one expects you to figure it out overnight. But we're here, and we'll help you get there, step by step." James shook his head. "I don't know. I just feel stuck." Elon felt a pang of frustration at the system that had failed people like James, frustration at the idea that no matter how much effort he poured into this initiative, it still wasn't enough. But he also knew that these were the moments that mattered the most. The ones where it wasn't about big headlines or high-tech solutions. It was about being there for people when they felt like giving up. He stood up and extended his hand once more. "I don't have all the answers, but I'll walk this path with you. You're not alone in this." James looked at him for a long moment before finally taking his hand. Maybe I'll give it another try." Elon smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. It wasn't a solution, but it was a step in the right direction. A small victory. Over the next few weeks, Elon and his team worked with James and others like him to implement more tailored support programs. They brought in mental health professionals who specialized in addiction recovery, and they made sure there was constant access to therapy and counseling. They also began offering life skills workshops that focused on practical things: how to manage finances, how to set personal goals, how to build relationships. And as James slowly began to rebuild his life, something incredible happened. He started showing up to community meetings, started looking for work, and even reconnected with his family after years of estrangement. It wasn't a smooth journey, but it was a journey nonetheless. It was a reminder to Elon that the real challenge wasn't in building the shelters or providing the technology. It was in addressing the complex, multifaceted needs of the people who had fallen through the cracks. The test wasn't over yet, but this, he realized, was the kind of change that mattered, the kind that took time, patience, and, most importantly, empathy. And so, as Elon left San Francisco that day, he felt a renewed sense of determination. They were on the right path. The road would be long and winding, but every step forward was a victory. And that was enough. In the months that followed the progress in San Francisco, Elon Musk's homelessness initiative began to face unexpected opposition. While many cities embraced the new model of sustainable housing and support systems, others remained hesitant. There were whispers of resistance in both the public and private sectors. Some government officials argued that the program was too radical, others feared the potential costs, and some felt that it was simply unrealistic to think that the problem of homelessness could be solved in the way Elon envisioned. Elon knew that resistance was inevitable. Every major change he had ever pursued, from electric vehicles to space travel, had faced skepticism and pushback. Yet, despite the struggles and doubts, he had always managed to push forward. But this time, there was something different. The opposition wasn't just about technology, it was about societal beliefs, politics, and entrenched systems that had failed to tackle homelessness for decades. It all came to a head when Elon received a call from Rachel, his trusted advisor. "Elon, we need to talk," Rachel said, her tone urgent. "What's going on?" Elon asked, immediately sensing the gravity of the situation. "There's been a major setback in New York," Rachel replied. "A group of city officials is pushing back on the initiative, calling it unsustainable. They're claiming that our approach is creating a dependency, not empowering people. And, to make matters worse, they're pulling support for any future projects unless we can prove our model works long-term." Elon rubbed his temples, trying to digest the news. New York had been one of the most eager cities to join the initiative, and now it seemed that the momentum was grinding to a halt. "Do they have specific concerns?" Elon asked, his mind already racing through possible solutions. "They're concerned about the scalability of the mobile housing units," Rachel explained. "They say it's impractical to build enough of them to meet demand. And some of the local businesses are worried about the impact on their communities. There's a lot of fear about rising crime rates, about property values dropping, and about the strain on public services." Elon sighed, his mind flickering back to his time spent on the streets. How little had ever been done to address the systemic issues that led to homelessness. This initiative was a direct challenge to those systems, and it was clear now that some were resisting that challenge. "I'll be there," Elon said finally. "I want to meet with these people face to face. I need to hear their concerns directly." Rachel hesitated for a moment. "Elon, I don't think that's going to be enough. They're entrenched in their beliefs. We're talking about a real fight here, and we might need more than just a conversation." Elon nodded, understanding her concerns. He knew that pushing forward was going to require more than just dialogue. It would take strategy, negotiation, and above all, a clear demonstration that their model could work. But Elon had always been a man who thrived under pressure, and this challenge was no different. The next day, Elon flew to New York. The city was buzzing with activity, the streets filled with the noise of traffic and the constant hum of the modern world. He had seen New York from a distance many times, but this time, as he entered the mayor's office, it felt different. This time, he was stepping into the lion's den. The meeting was set to take place in the heart of City Hall. As he entered the room, he was greeted by a panel of city officials, business owners, and local advocates who had been vocal about their concerns. The air was thick with tension. "Elon, thanks for coming," the mayor said, his voice cordial but guarded. "We've had a lot of conversations about this initiative, and we need to be sure it's in the best interest of our city. I understand your intentions, but there are a lot of unanswered questions." Elon took a seat at the table, his mind already focused on the task at hand. "I understand the concerns," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "I'm here to listen, but also to answer. The goal is simple, to end homelessness. Not with temporary fixes, but with long-term solutions. We're not just putting people in houses, we're giving them the tools to build a future. A future where they aren't dependent on the system, but are empowered to succeed." A city councilman, a woman in her early 50s with a stern expression, leaned forward. "That's all well and good, but where's the evidence? How can we trust that this model works? We've seen programs fail before, and we don't want to waste taxpayer dollars on something that might not have a lasting impact." Elon knew this was coming, the skepticism that often followed any new, ambitious initiative. "I get it. This isn't just about talking. It's about showing results. We have cities across the country where this program has worked. We've seen people move off the streets, into stable homes, and back into the workforce. I can't promise this will work for everyone, but we can't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result." The councilman shook her head. "You're asking us to make a huge leap of faith, without enough proof. And quite frankly, there's a lot of public backlash. We're hearing from constituents who don't want homeless shelters in their neighborhoods. They're worried about crime, about their property values plummeting. And those concerns are real." Elon paused, considering his words carefully. "I understand the fear. But we can't let fear dictate how we handle this problem. These people, these families, these individuals, they don't want to live on the streets. They want the same thing everyone wants, a chance. This program isn't just a shelter. It's a chance at a new life. The mayor watched him intently. You're asking us to trust you. To take a risk. But what's the long-term plan if this doesn't work? If it falls apart? Elon stood up, his voice growing stronger. If it doesn't work, I'll take full responsibility. But I believe in this. I've seen it work. And if we succeed here, New York can be the model for every other city in the world. The first city to end homelessness. Imagine that legacy. Imagine how that would change everything. The room was silent for a moment. The city officials exchanged looks, some skeptical, some uncertain. But Elon knew that in that silence, something had shifted. They weren't just hearing him anymore, they were considering the possibility. After a long pause, the mayor spoke again, his tone more measured. We'll need to see more data, more projections. We'll need a clear plan for how we can scale this, how we can ensure it's sustainable. I can provide that, Elon replied, his voice unwavering. We'll work with you to show that this isn't just a vision, it's a reality we can build together. The meeting ended without a clear resolution, but as Elon left the mayor's office, he felt the weight of the moment. He knew this wasn't over yet, but he also knew that this fight was one he couldn't afford to lose. Not for himself, but for the thousands of people whose lives depended on it. The resistance had shown him that change wasn't just about technology or resources, it was about convincing a society to rethink its fundamental assumptions about homelessness. It would take more than just innovation, it would take time, effort, and a collective will to do what was right. But Elon was ready. And the fight was only beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The weeks following the intense meeting in New York were some of the most challenging yet transformative for Elon Musk. While the resistance from local governments and business owners remained strong, there was an undeniable sense that the tide was beginning to shift. More cities were coming forward, eager to replicate the success stories in the cities where the initiative had already made progress. At the same time, there were still hurdles to clear. The skeptics, those who feared the potential downsides or the long-term viability of the program, weren't going down without a fight. Elon had never been one to back away from a challenge, and he certainly wasn't going to let a few setbacks deter him. He knew the initiative wasn't a quick fix, it was a long-term commitment to change. But what weighed heavily on his mind were the people who were still living on the streets, still waiting for a chance to begin anew. The pressure to succeed had never been greater. Then, one afternoon, a call came in that would mark a major turning point. Mr. Musk, Rachel's voice crackled through the phone, I think you need to hear this. What is it? Elon asked, sensing the urgency in her tone. There's been a breakthrough. A former resident from one of the pilot cities, San Diego, actually, wants to meet with you. She's become one of the strongest advocates for the program. She's been traveling across the country, speaking to different groups about the impact the initiative has had on her life. And she's doing it without any prompting from us. Elon's curiosity piqued. Who is she? Her name is Emily Hayes. She was one of the first to move into the modular homes. She was homeless for nearly 8 years before she joined the program. We've been hearing incredible things about her story, how she turned her life around and how she's now helping others do the same. Elon leaned forward, intrigued. I want to meet her. Arrange it as soon as possible. Within a few days, Emily Hayes was on a plane to meet Elon in Los Angeles. As she arrived at the headquarters, there was a certain aura about her. Emily was in her early 30s, with an energy that radiated a mix of resilience and optimism. She had the demeanor of someone who had fought for everything she had, and had won. Elon met her in the lobby, and as soon as they shook hands, he could sense the sincerity in her eyes. I've heard a lot about you, Elon said, offering her a seat. But I want to hear it from you, your story. I think it could be the turning point we need." Emily smiled, though there was a hint of vulnerability beneath her confident exterior. "I never thought I'd be in this position," she began, her voice steady but with a touch of emotion. "I grew up in a nice neighborhood. But after a string of bad decisions, bad luck, and the kind of trauma that sticks with you, I found myself on the streets. I didn't know where to turn. It felt like I was invisible to the world." Elon leaned in, genuinely engaged. "How did you get from there to here?" Emily paused, reflecting for a moment before continuing. "I hit rock bottom. I remember one night I was curled up on a bench in San Diego, feeling like I had no future. And then I heard about the program. The idea of having a home, a chance to start over, it sounded too good to be true. But I took a chance. I moved into one of those mobile homes, and from the moment I did, I felt like someone actually believed in me. I was given a safe place, a chance to heal, and most importantly, a community." Elon nodded thoughtfully. "What changed for you?" Emily's eyes brightened as she spoke. "The first thing was stability. I didn't have to worry about where I was going to sleep or if I'd get food for the next day. I had a roof over my head, and that gave me the room to focus on what really mattered, myself. I got into therapy. I started attending life skills workshops. And I began to believe that I could do more with my life." Emily's voice faltered for a moment. "But it wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to quit, when I didn't think I was strong enough. But the people around me, my neighbors, the staff, even people who were in the same position as me, kept pushing me forward. I eventually got a job, then moved into a permanent home, and now I'm helping others who are just starting their journey." Elon could hear the emotion in her voice. It was the kind of story that gave him hope, the kind of story that proved their approach was working in ways they hadn't even fully realized yet. Emily was living proof that the initiative was making a tangible difference in people's lives, even if it wasn't always a perfect solution. "Your story is incredible," Elon said, his voice sincere. "But I need to know, why did you decide to speak out? You could have kept your success to yourself, but instead, you've become an advocate." Emily's eyes sparkled with conviction. "Because it's not just about me. It's about everyone who is out there right now, struggling like I was. They deserve a chance. The system failed me for so long, but this program didn't just give me a house, it gave me my life back. I want other people to know that they can have that too. I want them to see that it's possible to start over." Elon felt a surge of gratitude. Here was someone who had experienced the depths of homelessness, yet had managed to pull herself out, not just for her own sake, but for the sake of others. Emily's story was the kind of powerful narrative that could change minds and open doors. "I'll do whatever I can to support you," Elon said. "We need more stories like yours, more people who believe in this initiative and are willing to share their experience." Emily smiled, a mixture of hope and determination in her expression. "I want to travel the country, meet with other communities, and tell them that there's hope. That this program is more than just a temporary solution, it's a chance to rebuild." Elon's mind was already racing with possibilities. Emily's message could be the key to shifting public opinion. If they could get more people like her to speak out, the narrative around homelessness could change from one of hopelessness to one of possibility. Together, they began strategizing how Emily could become the face of the initiative's advocacy campaign. She would travel to different cities, speak at community events, and share her story in the media. And Elon, of course, would continue to use his influence to ensure that the program's impact was felt on a national level. It was a collaboration that felt like the right next step, a partnership based on mutual trust and shared values. As they wrapped up the meeting, Elon couldn't help but feel a sense of hope he hadn't felt in months. For the first time in a long while, he knew that they were on the right path. The resistance, the skeptics, they were still there, but now there was a powerful counternarrative. They had proof that this initiative could work, and Emily Hayes was just the beginning. And with that, Elon felt more confident than ever that they could win this fight. The initiative wasn't just an idea anymore, it was a movement, and it was gaining momentum. As the advocacy campaign took shape, Elon Musk found himself more deeply immersed in the logistics of expanding the initiative across the country. The resistance in certain cities was far from over, but with Emily Hayes at the forefront, the narrative was shifting. The media coverage of her journey, her transformation, and her newfound sense of purpose began to resonate with people. It was becoming clear that, despite the opposition, the public was hungry for something different. But even as Emily became the face of the initiative, Elon knew that the real work was still ahead. For the project to truly gain traction, they needed more than just good stories, they needed infrastructure, funding, and support from influential allies who could help push the initiative forward. And that was where things started to get interesting. Elon had always been a master of building alliances, but he realized that the scale of this project required reaching beyond the usual corporate and political circles. He needed to bring in voices from different sectors, philanthropists, social activists, celebrities, and even former critics who could help shift the public perception. The stakes were too high to leave anything to chance. One evening, as Elon sat in his office, reflecting on the next steps, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Rachel. "I think I've found someone who could really make a difference," the text read. Elon raised an eyebrow. He typed back quickly. "Who?" "David Clark. He's a former venture capitalist turned philanthropist. He's been doing a lot of work with homelessness in Los Angeles, and I think he could be a major ally. He's got the kind of influence we need." Elon didn't hesitate. "Set up a meeting." Within days, Elon was sitting across from David Clark in a sleek, minimalist office overlooking downtown Los Angeles. Clark was in his early 50s, tall and lean, with a calm, calculated presence. He was known for his work with several non-profit organizations, and though he'd made millions in the tech world, he transitioned into a life focused on social change. "I've heard a lot about you, Elon," David began, offering a firm handshake. "And I've been following the homelessness initiative closely. I'll be honest, when I first heard about it, I was skeptical. But after seeing the data, after hearing stories like Emily's, I'm starting to believe this could be something big." Elon nodded, sensing an opening. "That's why I wanted to meet. We need someone who can help amplify this. We've made progress, but we need more partners. We need the resources, the credibility, and the muscle to take this nationwide. I think you're the kind of person who can help us get there." David leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. "I've seen firsthand how broken the system is. The programs that focus solely on temporary relief never work. I respect the way you're approaching this, Elon. But let me ask you something, do you think you're prepared for the fallout? This kind of change can be messy. People will push back, the media will scrutinize every decision, and there are powerful interests that don't want this to succeed." Elon didn't flinch. "I've dealt with that before. We've got the data to back up what we're doing, and the stories of people like Emily can't be ignored. This isn't just a policy initiative. It's a movement. And movements can't be stopped by fear or resistance." David studied Elon for a moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "You're right. Movements can't be stopped. And I like what you're doing here. I'm in. I'll help you get the funding, the partnerships, and the visibility you need. But there's one condition." Elon raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" David smiled, a glint of humor in his eyes. "We do this right. I'm not interested in a half-baked solution. If we're going to do this, we need to make sure the long-term sustainability is built in from the start. We can't just throw resources at the problem and hope it works. We need systems in place that will support these individuals for the rest of their lives, not just until the next election cycle." Elon felt a surge of relief. This was the kind of partnership he'd been searching for. "Agreed. We'll focus on long-term solutions, not just quick fixes. David stood up, extending his hand. Then let's get to work. With David Clark on board, Elon felt a renewed sense of purpose. This alliance would bring not only the necessary funding but also the expertise and credibility to help scale the initiative to new heights. The momentum was shifting. Now, it was time to expand. Meanwhile, Emily continued her advocacy efforts. Her speaking tour had taken her across the country, from small towns to major metropolitan cities, and her story was capturing hearts everywhere. In every speech, she spoke of resilience, of transformation, and of the power of a second chance. Everywhere she went, people were listening, and they were moved. But not everyone was a supporter. As Emily's influence grew, the opposition grew louder as well. Some critics, both political and media figures, claimed that the initiative was a misguided effort that would ultimately fail. Others argued that it was a waste of taxpayer dollars, that the resources could be better spent elsewhere. Elon knew that these voices would only get louder as the initiative gained traction. But he was undeterred. He had seen too much to turn back now. One afternoon, Emily called him while she was on the road. "Elon, we need to address the critics head-on. There's been a lot of noise, and it's starting to get under people's skin. We can't keep hiding from the opposition. We need to show them that this works." Elon sat back in his chair, considering her words. "What do you have in mind?" "I want to bring some of the critics into the fold," Emily suggested. "Invite them to visit the program in action. Let them meet the people whose lives have been changed. Let them see that this isn't just a theoretical solution, it's real. It's working." Elon smiled. Emily had a point. The opposition wasn't going to be silenced by words alone, they needed to experience the program firsthand. If they saw the tangible results, they might change their minds. "I like that idea," Elon said. "We'll set up a tour. We'll show them the difference we're making, and we'll do it in a way they can't ignore." It was a bold move, but Elon knew it was the right one. He and Emily had the power to shift the narrative, but only if they were willing to face the opposition head-on. And so, plans were set in motion. Soon, a group of critics, government officials, business leaders, and media representatives, would visit the initiative's most successful locations. They would meet the people whose lives had been transformed, and they would witness firsthand the impact of the program. Elon and Emily were ready for the challenge. The turning point had arrived. The next few weeks would determine whether the initiative would truly change the course of history, or whether it would be swept away by the tides of resistance. The tour was set for the following week, and the anticipation was palpable. Elon Musk and Emily Hayes spent hours reviewing every detail, ensuring the visit would go off without a hitch. They both knew that this was a make-or-break moment. If they could convince the critics to see the initiative in person, to witness the lives it had transformed, it could change the trajectory of the entire movement. But if the critics remained unmoved, it would be a serious setback. The group of critics, city officials, business leaders, and influential journalists, had been selected carefully. They represented a wide cross-section of the opposition, and they all had reservations about the effectiveness and sustainability of the program. Some believed that the initiative was a short-term fix to a long-term problem. Others questioned the feasibility of expanding it nationwide. A few had even publicly ridiculed the idea, calling it a publicity stunt. Elon and Emily had a plan: show them what had been accomplished, let the people whose lives had been changed speak for themselves, and let the critics see the long-term benefits for the community. But they also knew that the critics would be watching closely for any flaws, anything they could use to undermine the program. The day of the tour arrived. A sleek black bus, with windows tinted to a near darkness, pulled up in front of the first site, an urban neighborhood that had been part of the initiative for over a year. The group of critics stepped off the bus, clearly skeptical. Some looked at the modular homes with disdain, while others squinted at the small community that had sprung up around them. Elon and Emily were there to greet them, their faces calm but with a shared sense of determination. "Welcome," Elon said, his voice firm but welcoming. "This is one of the many communities that have benefited from our initiative. I think you'll find that the results speak for themselves." Emily added, "And we've brought along a few people who've lived here for quite some time. They're the real success stories. I want you to hear their experiences." The critics exchanged wary glances, but there was no turning back now. They followed Elon and Emily through the neighborhood, stopping at various homes along the way. It was an impressive sight, a collection of modern, well-designed modular homes nestled on a quiet street. The people who lived here seemed to be at peace, their faces lighting up when they saw Elon and Emily. As they reached the first home, Emily introduced the group to Sarah, a woman in her early 40s who had been living in the modular housing for 6 months. Sarah had been homeless for years, struggling with addiction and depression before the initiative gave her the stability she so desperately needed. Now, she was working as a receptionist in a nearby business, and her 2 young children were thriving in a safe environment. Sarah's story was a powerful one. She spoke about the darkness she had once lived in, how she had lost all hope, and how the program had given her not just a home but a sense of purpose. She spoke with a raw vulnerability that was impossible to ignore. "I didn't know if I'd ever be able to turn my life around," Sarah said, her voice shaking with emotion. "But this program, it's given me everything I thought I'd lost. I have my kids back. I have a job. I have my dignity." One of the critics, a city council member from San Francisco, crossed his arms, clearly skeptical. "But what happens when the funding runs out? How do we know this is sustainable? And what about the people who don't want to work, who just want to take advantage of the system?" Elon stepped in, his voice calm but resolute. "What we've learned is that providing people with stability and the resources to improve their lives is key to long-term success. We don't just give people a home, we give them the tools to rebuild their lives. For many of them, that means jobs, education, and therapy. The success rate in cities where the initiative has been fully implemented is significantly higher than traditional methods." Emily nodded, her expression serious. "And as for sustainability, that's something we've been working on from day one. These homes are designed to be affordable, and we've partnered with local businesses, community organizations, and philanthropists to ensure ongoing support. The program isn't a handout, it's a hand up." The council member seemed unconvinced, but Emily's passion was undeniable. As the group moved on to the next home, another resident, Marcus, stepped forward. Marcus had been living in the modular community for almost a year, and his transformation was even more remarkable. Once a homeless veteran struggling with PTSD, Marcus now ran a small landscaping business, employing other people from the community. "I never thought I'd have a chance to get back on my feet," Marcus said, his voice steady. "But this place gave me a chance to heal. And it gave me the opportunity to help others who were in the same position I was." Another critic, a well-known journalist, was visibly moved by Marcus's story. "I've been covering homelessness for years, and I've seen so many failed attempts at solutions. But this is different," she said, almost to herself. As the tour continued, it became clear that the critics were starting to soften. They couldn't deny the impact the initiative was having on the people who had participated. The residents of the community weren't just surviving, they were thriving. They were working, contributing to their neighborhoods, and building new lives. By the time the tour ended, the group of critics was quieter than when they'd arrived. They had seen the tangible effects of the program and heard the personal stories of those who had benefited. Whether they were fully convinced or not, they couldn't deny that something was happening here. Something that was making a real difference. As the critics boarded the bus to leave, Elon turned to Emily. "That went better than I expected." Emily smiled, a look of satisfaction in her eyes. "They still have their doubts, but we've planted the seed. It's up to them now." As the bus drove away, Elon and Emily stood in the middle of the community, watching the homes that had once been nothing more than an idea come to life. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time, Elon felt that they were on the right path. The next few weeks would be crucial. The media would undoubtedly report on the tour, and the critics would share their impressions. But now, more than ever, Elon believed in the potential of the program. And with Emily's continued advocacy and the new alliances they had formed, he knew they had the momentum to push forward. They were changing the conversation about homelessness, one story at a time. The aftermath of the critics' visit was both anticipated and surprising. Elon Musk had expected some resistance, but the reactions from the media and the public were more mixed than he'd anticipated. Some critics still pushed back against the initiative, citing its high costs and potential for failure. However, something shifted. Something in the stories of Sarah, Marcus, and the others had started to resonate with a larger audience. The stories didn't just show that people were surviving, they were thriving, reclaiming their dignity, and giving back to society. Emily's phone never stopped buzzing. Supporters from around the country were reaching out to her, urging her to continue pushing forward. People wanted to help, to be part of something that was clearly more than just another band-aid solution. This was a movement, and Emily could feel it in the growing excitement, the sense of urgency. People wanted change, and they were ready to do what it took to make it happen. As the weeks passed, the media began to shift. Instead of dismissing the program as an unrealistic dream, some outlets started highlighting the success stories. A feature article ran in a popular magazine, detailing how the initiative had impacted several families and communities. The headline read, "A Second Chance, How One Man's Vision is Transforming Homelessness in America." It was clear that the conversation was changing, slowly but steadily. But not everyone was convinced. A high-profile opposition leader, Congressman Matthew Hale, held a press conference just a few days after the tour. He was a staunch critic of the initiative, and he wasted no time making his views clear. Elon Musk's initiative may look good on paper, he said, but it's ultimately unsustainable. We're talking about a massive financial commitment that simply doesn't make sense in the long run. The resources would be better spent elsewhere. It was a bold attack, and Elon knew it was only the beginning. Hale was known for his strong political influence and had already started rallying support among other elected officials who viewed the initiative as an overreach of private resources into the public sphere. He'd already issued statements calling for more transparency regarding the program's funding and its long-term impact on taxpayers. Despite the negative backlash, Elon remained focused. He was prepared for this kind of resistance. After all, it wasn't the first time he'd gone up against entrenched interests. He knew that if they could get the program to work on a larger scale, if they could demonstrate its long-term effectiveness, then the critics would have no choice but to recognize its value. Elon met with his team to strategize their next steps. "We need to make sure we're addressing the concerns about sustainability head-on," he said. "We've got the data. We've got the stories. Now, we need to show how this can work on a larger scale without bankrupting the system." Emily, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "I think it's time we expand to other cities. We've already seen success in some areas, but if we show that the program can scale, that will be the ultimate proof." Elon nodded. "Agreed. Let's focus on expanding to 2 more cities, Chicago and Houston. Both have large homeless populations, and if we can show real impact there, the momentum will be undeniable." But as they began preparing for the next phase of the initiative, a new challenge arose. Emily received a call from her former social worker, Angela, who had been instrumental in connecting her with the program in the first place. "Emily, you need to hear this," Angela's voice was filled with concern. "I've been hearing whispers in the community. There are rumors that some of the people behind the program aren't as altruistic as they seem. I don't know if it's true, but it's something you should look into." Emily's heart sank. "What kind of rumors?" "People are saying that there's a push to privatize the housing part of the program, that certain investors are trying to profit off of it," Angela said. "I know this sounds crazy, but it's been circulating among some of the social workers and other nonprofits. Be careful, Emily. If there's any truth to this, it could derail everything. Emily felt a knot form in her stomach. She knew that the program had attracted attention from powerful figures, and some of them had financial interests that might clash with the vision of the initiative. But the thought that some might be using the movement for personal gain was something she hadn't anticipated. "I'll look into it," Emily said, trying to steady her voice. "Thank you for letting me know, Angela. I'll talk to Elon about it." Later that day, Emily met with Elon in his office. She filled him in on the rumors, and Elon's expression grew serious. "We can't afford to let this become a distraction," Elon said, leaning forward. "We have to remain transparent. If there's anyone trying to exploit the program for personal gain, we need to root it out immediately. That's not what we're about." Emily nodded, feeling a sense of urgency. "But we also can't afford to let this affect the public perception. If the critics get a hold of this, it could be catastrophic. We need to act fast." Elon rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "I'll make some calls. We'll start an internal investigation, and I'll make sure we stay on top of this. The last thing we need is for the narrative to shift to something negative. But at the same time, we can't let these whispers turn into something bigger." Emily and Elon both knew that the stakes were higher than ever. With the initiative gaining momentum, they couldn't afford to let any internal issues undermine the credibility of the program. They needed to act swiftly, and transparently. But as they prepared for the next phase of the initiative's growth, Emily couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. If the rumors were true, it would change everything. And she wasn't sure they were ready for the fallout. The initiative's future, its success or failure, might depend on what they uncovered in the coming days. The fight was no longer just against public skepticism. It was against forces that might be working behind the scenes to pull the program in a direction that could compromise its integrity. It was time to dig deeper. The next few days were a blur of activity, as Emily and Elon dug deeper into the rumors. They'd been working tirelessly to make the program a success, but now, the shadows of doubt loomed over them. Every time Emily tried to focus on the positive momentum, expanding to Chicago and Houston, garnering more support, the nagging thought about potential exploitation gnawed at her. Who could be behind this? And more importantly, what were they trying to achieve? Elon, always the pragmatist, focused on managing the media narrative. He had a public image to protect, and any scandal, even a whisper of one, could seriously undermine the movement. Emily, however, was consumed with a different concern. She wasn't just worried about perception, she was worried about the lives that were at stake. If anyone was trying to manipulate the system for personal profit, it could cost the very people the program was designed to help. After a tense meeting with Elon, where they both agreed that they needed to look into the financial backers of the initiative more closely, Emily decided to meet with Angela in person. She needed more details, something concrete. Angela was the one person who had always been able to dig beneath the surface, and Emily trusted her judgment. That evening, they sat in a quiet cafe, the hum of conversations around them barely registering as Emily leaned in close to Angela. "So, tell me everything you've heard," Emily said, her voice low. "I need to know who's behind these rumors. Do you have any names?" Angela glanced around, her eyes darting nervously, before she spoke in a hushed tone. "I'm not sure about names yet, but there's been talk of a group of investors, people with deep pockets who see the program as a way to make a lot of money. They've been pressuring some of the contractors to scale up quickly, and I've heard whispers about possible kickbacks in exchange for lucrative deals." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Kickbacks. Lucrative deals. It sounded like something straight out of a corporate scandal. Are these people connected to anyone in the program? Anyone we know? Angela hesitated, then nodded. There's one name that keeps coming up, Victor Delaney. He's a major investor in real estate development, and he's been trying to get involved with the housing side of the initiative. Word on the street is that he's trying to buy up land in some of the communities you've built, with the goal of turning them into high-end properties once the program is finished. Emily's mind raced. Victor Delaney. She didn't know him personally, but she'd seen his name come up in the background of some early meetings with the program's financial backers. He was a well-known figure in the real estate world, but his interests were typically in luxury developments, not affordable housing for the homeless. And you think he's trying to turn this into a profit-making scheme? Emily asked, her voice tight. It's not just him, Angela continued, her face clouded with concern. It's the people he's connected to. There are murmurs about partnerships with developers who want to buy up properties in these neighborhoods and gentrify them. They're not in it for the people, they're in it for the real estate value. Emily felt her stomach tighten. This was everything she feared. The program was supposed to provide people with a fresh start, not become a stepping stone for investors to exploit. She had to do something about this, fast. I can't let this happen, Angela, Emily said firmly. I won't let the program be hijacked. We need to find out if there's any truth to this, and if there is, we need to stop it before it's too late. Angela nodded, her face full of concern. Be careful, Emily. This kind of thing doesn't just go away. If you go up against these people, they won't play fair. Emily stood up, determination hardening her resolve. I'm not backing down. These people need help, not to be used for someone else's profit. I'll talk to Elon. We'll figure out a plan. Later that evening, Emily returned to Elon's office, a fire burning in her chest. She briefed him on the conversation with Angela and the troubling news about Victor Delaney and his potential involvement in exploiting the program. Elon's face remained unreadable as he listened, but his eyes narrowed slightly as she spoke. This is a problem, Elon said once she finished. If these rumors are true, it could destroy everything we've worked for. Not just in terms of public perception, but the people who are relying on us for a second chance, they could get caught in the crossfire. Emily agreed. Exactly. This isn't just about business anymore, it's about real lives. I won't let them be turned into commodities. Elon nodded, his expression steely. We need to get ahead of this. If Delaney is involved, we need to put the brakes on any dealings with him, and we need to do it fast. Let's start by getting our financials in order and identifying any possible connections to him or his associates. They worked late into the night, going over contracts, investor lists, and financial reports, trying to trace any potential links to Delaney in his real estate interests. The deeper they dug, the more unsettling it became. There were a number of obscure connections, and it wasn't long before they discovered that some of the contractors were indeed working with companies tied to Delaney's network. It's worse than we thought, Elon said grimly as they sat over a mountain of paperwork. Delaney's group has influence in several of the cities we're working in. We can't let this continue. Emily felt the weight of the situation bearing down on her. What do we do now? Elon looked up, determination in his eyes. We go public. We confront this head-on. If Delaney is trying to profit off the backs of these people, we'll expose him. We'll take the fight to the media, show the public what's really going on. And if we need to, we'll sever ties with anyone connected to him. It was a bold move, but it was the only way forward. If they were going to protect the integrity of the program, they had to root out the corruption before it spread any further. Over the next few days, Elon and Emily met with their legal team, media contacts, and key supporters. They carefully crafted a statement that would expose the connections they had uncovered, and they prepared to launch a full-scale investigation into Victor Delaney and his network. But as they prepared for the public reveal, Emily couldn't help but wonder, how deep did this go? How much of the initiative had already been compromised? One thing was certain, the fight for the future of the program was just beginning. It had been a week since Elon and Emily had decided to confront the growing issue of corruption within the initiative, and now, it was time to act. The weight of their decision pressed heavily on both of them, what they were about to do could either secure the program's future or unravel it entirely. If they exposed the truth about Victor Delaney and his network, there was no turning back. The scandal could tarnish everything they had worked so hard to build. Elon was used to handling high-stakes situations, but this felt different. This wasn't just about a business venture or technological advancement. This was about real people, people like Sarah, Marcus, and thousands of others who were relying on the program to give them a second chance. "Are you sure about this?" Emily asked as they sat in Elon's office the night before the press conference. "Once we go public, there's no going back." Elon looked out the window, his face illuminated by the city lights below. "We don't have a choice. If we let Delaney and his group continue, we'll lose the trust of everyone we've helped, and the ones we still want to help. We need to expose this now, before it's too late." Emily nodded. She had spent days reviewing every detail of the investigation, connecting the dots between Delaney's interests and the contractors involved in the program. The evidence was clear, and now, it was time to take action. The following morning, a team of journalists, activists, and supporters gathered at a large conference room. It was a pivotal moment. Elon and Emily stood side by side at the front of the room, prepared to address the media. There was a sense of anticipation in the air. The news cameras clicked and whirred as reporters jotted down notes, waiting for the first word from Elon. Elon adjusted the microphone and took a deep breath. "Thank you all for being here today. I know many of you are eager to hear about the progress of the initiative, but today, we're here to address something even more important, something that could threaten the very foundation of what we're trying to do." Emily stepped forward. "As some of you may know, our mission has always been to provide a sustainable, long-term solution for homelessness. We've worked tirelessly to create a program that gives people a chance at a new life, dignity, hope, and stability. But recently, we've uncovered something that threatens to undermine all of that." The room fell silent, the gravity of the situation hanging in the air. Emily continued. "We've discovered that certain individuals, most notably Victor Delaney, a prominent real estate developer, have been attempting to exploit this program for personal financial gain. We've found evidence that some contractors connected to Delaney's network have been pressuring us to sell properties in the communities we've built, with the goal of turning them into luxury developments once the program is completed." The reporters exchanged looks, their pens poised. They had known something was going on beneath the surface, but this revelation was far more explosive than any of them had expected. "We cannot and will not allow our efforts to be hijacked," Elon said, his voice firm. "This initiative is not about profit, it's about people. If we allow those with ulterior motives to infiltrate the program, we'll lose sight of the mission. So today, we're taking a stand. We are cutting ties with anyone who seeks to exploit this program, and we will be working with law enforcement to ensure that those who are involved in any illicit activity are held accountable." The room buzzed with activity as reporters scrambled to ask questions. Emily and Elon stood resolutely, ready for the onslaught. One reporter raised her hand. "Elon, how do you respond to critics who say that this kind of scandal is inevitable when private companies like yours are involved in social programs? Will this hurt your credibility in the future?" Elon met her gaze. "This isn't about private companies. This is about integrity. There will always be people trying to exploit systems for their own gain, but that doesn't mean we should abandon the idea of making a difference. We are committed to the people we've promised to help, and we will not let anyone derail that." Another reporter chimed in. "What about Delaney? Will he face legal consequences for his involvement in these alleged actions?" Emily stepped forward. "We're working with our legal team to gather all the necessary information, and we will cooperate fully with the authorities to ensure that justice is served. Delaney's actions are not just unethical, they're illegal, and he will be held accountable." The questions kept coming, but Emily and Elon held their ground. They knew that this press conference would be a turning point, a moment of reckoning. It wasn't going to be easy, but they had no other choice. The truth had to come out. As the conference came to a close, the reporters dispersed, already drafting their stories. The weight of what had just been revealed hung heavily in the air. Some people would praise them for their transparency and willingness to confront the issue head-on. Others would see this as a failure, a crack in the perfect image they had tried so hard to create. But Emily knew one thing for sure: they had done the right thing. They had chosen integrity over profit, and in that decision, they had not only preserved the integrity of the initiative but also made it stronger. The truth might be painful, but it would set them free. That evening, as the headlines broke across social media and the news channels, Emily and Elon took a moment to reflect. There was no turning back now, but they had made a stand for the people who mattered most. As Elon leaned back in his chair, he looked over at Emily. "We've opened Pandora's box," he said. "But it needed to be done." Emily nodded, the weight of their decision settling over her. "Now we rebuild. And we make sure nothing like this happens again." Elon smiled slightly. "That's right. This is just the beginning." But deep down, both of them knew that the real challenge was only starting. Exposing the corruption was only one battle in a much larger war, a war for the hearts and minds of the public, and for the future of the homeless initiative they had worked so hard to create. And they were ready for it. The days following the press conference were intense. The world had heard their side of the story, and now it was time to see how it would play out. Headlines screamed about the explosive revelations, and social media was flooded with opinions, both positive and negative. The program, which had once been hailed as a beacon of hope, was now under a microscope, and every decision made moving forward would be scrutinized. As the dust began to settle, the backlash came fast and furious. Delaney's supporters, many of whom were powerful real estate moguls and business leaders, tried to discredit Elon and Emily at every turn. They claimed that the accusations were baseless, that the evidence was circumstantial at best, and that the initiative was doomed to fail. "Are you really going to trust someone who's been making billions off of this program? A guy like Elon Musk who can't even handle a simple social experiment," one of Delaney's top associates was quoted as saying on a major news network. This whole thing was bound to collapse eventually. Emily sat in the conference room, staring at the screen in disbelief as she watched the clip. The words stung, but she knew they couldn't back down. This wasn't just about defending their reputations, it was about defending the thousands of people who relied on the program to rebuild their lives. "Are you prepared for the battle that's about to unfold?" Angela asked as she stood beside Emily, watching the news unfold. "The attacks are only going to get worse." Emily took a deep breath, the weight of the situation bearing down on her. "I know. But we have no choice. If we don't fight back now, everything we've built will fall apart." She could feel the tension building, but the team had agreed on a strategy: hold firm, provide transparency, and use every tool at their disposal to ensure that the public saw the truth. Over the next few weeks, Elon and Emily made sure to stay in front of the media. They went on talk shows, sat down with investigative journalists, and spoke with advocacy groups that supported the homeless. They showed the public the work they had done, the lives they had changed, and the progress they had made. They also revealed every detail of the investigation, publishing the full report and laying out the evidence against Delaney and his network. They wanted to prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that their cause had never been about profit, it had always been about people. But despite their best efforts, the public perception was divided. Some people applauded them for their transparency and courage. Others, however, couldn't shake the feeling that the program was tainted by its association with those seeking to profit from it. In the midst of all this turmoil, Elon became more focused. He knew they had to do more than just defend themselves, they had to rebuild the program from the ground up. It was the only way to restore trust. "I've been thinking," Elon said one evening as he met with Emily and their team. "We need to go beyond just fixing the corruption. We need to create something more robust, something that will allow people to have a stake in the future, something that will ensure no one can hijack this program again." Emily raised an eyebrow. What are you suggesting? What if we made the program more community-driven? Elon proposed. Instead of relying on external contractors, we bring in the people we're helping, those who have graduated from the program, to take leadership roles. They understand the community's needs better than anyone, and they'll have a real incentive to ensure its success. Emily's eyes widened with realization. You're talking about empowering the very people we're helping to become the leaders of this initiative? Exactly, Elon said. We give them the tools, the knowledge, and the resources to manage their own neighborhoods. We take the power away from investors and give it back to the people. The idea was radical, but it was exactly what the program needed. If they could shift the focus to community ownership and leadership, they would eliminate the risk of exploitation. It was a bold move, one that would require an overhaul of their entire approach, but it was the only way forward. And so, with that vision in mind, Elon and Emily began to reorganize the program. They started by meeting with graduates, people who had successfully transitioned out of homelessness and into stable lives, and asked for their input. They wanted to know what worked, what didn't, and what could be done better. The feedback they received was invaluable. Graduates didn't just want homes, they wanted opportunities. They wanted to be a part of the solution, not just the recipients of charity. Many had skills in construction, education, healthcare, and business, but they needed the platform to put those skills to use. That's the key, Emily said as she reviewed the proposals. We create a community model, where those who've gone through the program help build it. They'll take on leadership roles, managers, mentors, advocates, and they'll have a direct hand in shaping the future of these communities. Elon nodded, a sense of purpose in his eyes. We've been so focused on providing the infrastructure, we forgot that the real strength comes from the people themselves. They need to own this process. This is their future. Over the next few months, they began to implement the changes. They started small, testing the idea in one of the original program cities. They gave a group of graduates the opportunity to manage a housing complex, providing them with the resources and training they needed to succeed. The results were nothing short of remarkable. The community members took pride in their work, maintained the properties with care, and began offering mentorship to those still in the program. It was proof that the community-driven model could work. As the success of this new approach spread, public opinion began to shift. More and more people saw that the initiative was not only about housing, it was about empowering people to change their own lives. It wasn't about charity, it was about creating a sustainable, self-sufficient future. The pressure from Delaney's camp continued, but it was becoming less and less effective. The more they tried to discredit Elon and Emily, the more they were met with resistance from the people who had benefited from the program. Those who had once been homeless now stood as proud champions of the initiative, vocalizing their gratitude and support. By the time the new phase of the program rolled out, it was clear that their gamble had paid off. The program wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. And while there was still much work to be done, Emily and Elon knew that they had taken the right path. In the end, they had not only defended their program from the forces that sought to exploit it, but had built something even stronger in the process. They had given people the power to rebuild their own lives, and in doing so, they had created a model for the future. As the dust continued to settle after the public revelation and the changes to the program, Elon and Emily began to feel a sense of cautious optimism. The backlash was still a presence in the media, but the growing success of the new community-driven approach began to drown out the negativity. For the first time in months, they felt like they were moving forward, not just defending themselves but building something real. Elon sat in his office late one evening, reviewing the latest numbers. The data was promising. Over the last quarter, more people had been successfully integrated back into stable living conditions than at any other point in the program's history. More importantly, the communities that had adopted the new leadership model were flourishing. Crime rates had dropped, businesses were growing, and the mental health of the residents had significantly improved. He looked up as Emily entered the room, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and quiet satisfaction. "We're on the right track," she said, her voice weary but hopeful. "The new cities are showing real promise. People are taking ownership in ways we never thought possible." Elon smiled, the weight of their previous challenges still present but tempered by the progress they were now witnessing. "Yeah, but we can't rest. The system is working, but we need to scale this fast." Emily nodded. "We've been working on a proposal to expand into more cities, start bringing in other states to test the model. If we can replicate the success, we could change the entire landscape for homelessness in this country." Elon stood and walked over to the large windows that overlooked the city, his mind working through the possibilities. He knew that expansion was essential, but it would require a level of commitment and coordination that they hadn't yet reached. "We need more support," he said, turning back to her. "We can't do this alone anymore. We've had success, but if we want this to truly work, we need both the public and private sectors to buy in." Emily's eyes narrowed slightly. "What are you suggesting?" "Partnerships," Elon said, a glint of determination in his eyes. "We need to convince local governments, corporations, and even philanthropists that they need to invest in this model. We need funding, political backing, and a coalition that will help us expand quickly." Emily thought about it for a moment, weighing the implications. Elon's idea wasn't just about building more communities, it was about building a movement. If they could get powerful stakeholders to back them, it could propel the initiative into something far greater than they had initially envisioned. But there were risks. Getting people on board with the vision would require more than just data and success stories, it would take a monumental amount of trust, a trust that had been shaken in the wake of the scandal. "Let's get to work on that," Emily finally said. "We'll need to approach this carefully, build relationships with the right people. It's going to take time, but it's the next logical step." As weeks turned into months, Elon and Emily embarked on a new phase of their journey, advocating for widespread adoption of their model. They began traveling to cities across the country, meeting with local governments, business leaders, and non-profit organizations. They attended forums, held town halls, and spoke to anyone who would listen. The conversations weren't always easy. Some people were still skeptical, questioning whether such an ambitious project could be scaled successfully. Others were more interested in the financial bottom line than the human side of things. But Emily and Elon were undeterred. They had seen firsthand what the program could do, and they knew that if they could just get people to see the bigger picture, they could change the world. One of the most challenging aspects of their campaign was convincing cities to allocate public funds to the initiative. Many local governments had been hesitant to invest in programs that didn't offer immediate financial returns, and some politicians feared backlash from their constituencies. But Elon, ever the visionary, had a plan to convince them. He began crafting a new narrative, one that framed the issue of homelessness not just as a moral obligation, but as an economic opportunity. "We're not just building homes," he would tell city leaders. "We're building workers, consumers, and neighbors. By investing in the future of these people, you're giving your city a chance to grow, to thrive, and to become a place of opportunity for everyone." It was a hard sell, but slowly, it began to work. Some cities, particularly those in urban areas with higher rates of homelessness, started to take notice. They were willing to try the program, even if it meant taking a financial risk. Meanwhile, Emily and Elon worked tirelessly behind the scenes to secure private partnerships with large corporations. Elon's network of connections proved invaluable, and soon, major tech companies, construction firms, and financial institutions began to show interest. The idea of contributing to a program that not only helped to solve homelessness but also empowered communities and fostered economic growth was one that appealed to many. Months later, as Elon and Emily stood at the groundbreaking ceremony for a new community in a city they had fought so hard to get into, they both realized how far they had come. The first phase of their plan was now officially in motion. It was a moment of triumph, but they knew that their journey was far from over. The crowd applauded as the ceremonial shovel hit the ground, but Elon and Emily shared a quiet moment together, watching the scene unfold. "We did it," Emily said, her voice full of emotion. "This is only the beginning." Elon nodded, the familiar spark in his eyes. "Yeah, but it's a start. There's so much more we can do." They both knew that the challenges ahead were immense. But with the support of a growing coalition of supporters, their initiative was no longer a single program, it was the beginning of a nationwide movement. And as they looked ahead, they knew that the road would continue to be difficult, but it was the road to real, lasting change, a future where homelessness could be eradicated, one community at a time. The momentum that had built around their initiative had caught the attention of leaders beyond the United States. Media outlets from around the world were covering the success of the new community-driven model, and Elon and Emily were fielding requests for interviews, speaking engagements, and partnerships. It was no longer just an American issue, it was a global one. In early spring, Elon received an invitation from the United Nations to speak at a global summit on poverty and social innovation. It was an opportunity neither he nor Emily had expected, but it was the perfect platform to showcase what they had built and to push for the program's expansion worldwide. Standing in front of the massive glass window that framed the skyline of New York City, Elon turned to Emily as she reviewed the invitation. "Do you think we're ready for this?" Emily glanced up, a look of determination in her eyes. "We have to be. We've shown it can work. But now it's about showing the world that we can do this on a global scale. We have to make them see that it's not just about housing, it's about giving people the dignity of opportunity." Elon nodded, his mind already racing ahead. The UN summit wasn't just a chance to speak, it was an opportunity to build partnerships with world governments, international organizations, and global philanthropists who could provide the necessary funding and infrastructure to scale the program to countries facing similar challenges. The night before the summit, the two of them sat down for a final strategy session. It had been a whirlwind of meetings and preparations, but this was the moment they had been working toward. The world was watching, and they had to make their case. "I think it's time to tell the full story," Emily said, looking up from her notes. "People need to understand not just the statistics but the human element. We have to remind them why we're doing this in the first place." Elon agreed. "We'll focus on the success stories, the people whose lives have changed. But we can't sugarcoat the reality either. This isn't easy, and it takes time. We need to show the world that it's worth the effort." The summit was held in a grand conference hall, with leaders from around the world in attendance. The stage was set, and the air was electric with anticipation. Elon and Emily were introduced, and they made their way to the podium, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. The crowd was a mixture of global leaders, policy experts, philanthropists, and journalists. Some were skeptical, others curious, but all were eager to hear how this seemingly radical model could be applied beyond the US. Elon started first, his voice steady but filled with passion. "We're here today because we believe in one fundamental truth: homelessness isn't just a problem, it's a solvable problem. We've seen it firsthand. We've built communities, empowered individuals, and helped people transform their lives. And now, we're here to show you that this model can work globally." Emily took over from there, sharing the stories of individuals who had turned their lives around. She spoke of Michael, a former homeless man in New York who had risen to become a mentor for others in the program. She spoke of Carmen, a mother of 3 who had managed to break free from generational poverty and had started her own small business within the community. The room was silent as she spoke, the raw emotion in her voice palpable. "This isn't just about giving people a home," Emily said. "It's about giving them the tools to build a future for themselves and for their children. We are not asking for charity, we are offering the opportunity to empower people to rise up and become leaders in their own communities." The room erupted into applause. For the next hour, Elon and Emily explained the intricacies of the program, how it worked, how it was funded, how it could be adapted to different regions and cultures. They talked about the obstacles they had faced, the mistakes they had made, and the lessons they had learned. But most importantly, they emphasized the need for collaboration. We need to stop treating homelessness as an isolated issue, Elon said, his voice growing more intense. It's a complex problem that requires a multifaceted solution. Governments, corporations, and individuals need to come together to create lasting change. This isn't just a program. It's a movement. And it's a movement that needs to be global. When the presentation ended, the room was filled with questions. Some were practical: how would they secure funding in countries with weaker economies? Others were philosophical: how could they ensure that this model would work across different cultures and political systems? But despite the tough questions, the response was overwhelmingly positive. There was a sense that something big was happening, something that could actually work. After the session, a number of world leaders approached Elon and Emily to express interest in working together. They discussed potential pilot programs in countries like India, Brazil, and South Africa, all of which were grappling with significant homelessness and poverty issues. For the first time, it felt as though their vision was within reach, not just in the US, but around the world. Weeks passed, and the aftermath of the summit was nothing short of transformative. New partnerships were formed, and plans to expand the program internationally began to take shape. Elon and Emily traveled to several countries to meet with local leaders and see firsthand how the model could be adapted to meet the unique challenges of each region. The support was overwhelming. In Brazil, local leaders in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro were eager to replicate the community-driven model, focusing on the informal settlements that plagued their cities. In India, the program resonated with policymakers who saw the potential to uplift millions of people living in poverty. But even as they moved forward, there were still obstacles to overcome. Each new city and country posed its own set of challenges. Political instability, cultural differences, and economic constraints all played a role in slowing the process. Yet, as they faced these hurdles, Elon and Emily knew that the key to success lay in the flexibility of their model, tailoring it to meet the needs of each community, but always staying true to the core principles of empowerment, opportunity, and dignity. 1 year after the UN summit, Elon and Emily stood on a stage in Cape Town, South Africa, at the launch of the first international community built on their model. The crowd gathered before them was filled with hope: local leaders, global dignitaries, and people from the surrounding neighborhoods who were eager to be part of something bigger. Elon looked at Emily, a quiet smile playing on his lips. "This is it. This is what we've been working for." Emily nodded, her eyes shining with pride. "And this is just the beginning." The road ahead was still long, but as they looked out at the people who had come together to make this dream a reality, they knew they had taken a giant leap toward a world where homelessness could one day be a thing of the past. The sun dipped below the horizon as Elon and Emily stood on the balcony of their new office overlooking Cape Town's bustling city center. The energy of the city mirrored the excitement and anticipation surrounding their program's first international launch. Yet, for all the progress, there was a lingering sense of uncertainty. They had expanded beyond their wildest expectations, but the real challenge was yet to come: how could they sustain this momentum on a global scale? With each new country, new culture, and new set of challenges, Elon and Emily were faced with decisions that could either propel their mission to new heights or undo everything they had worked for. "We've crossed an ocean," Elon said quietly, leaning against the railing. "But there's still so much more water to navigate." Emily stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the horizon. She knew what Elon meant. The excitement of success was tempered by the weight of responsibility. They were not just building homes for the homeless anymore, they were shaping the future of cities. They were changing the way societies viewed poverty, human dignity, and economic opportunity. "I know," Emily said thoughtfully. "But we can't lose sight of what we've already accomplished. Look at what we've built, look at the people whose lives are different today because of this." Elon nodded. "You're right. I just keep thinking about what's next." How do we keep the program sustainable as we expand further? How do we balance the need for growth with the need to keep our values intact? A sound behind them signaled the arrival of one of their team members. Jenna, their project coordinator from the Cape Town initiative, entered the room with a stack of papers in hand. "We've just received the latest reports on community engagement and outreach," Jenna said, her voice filled with optimism. "The initial reception has been overwhelmingly positive. Local businesses are showing interest in partnering with us, and the community workshops have been packed." Elon's eyes lit up. "That's great news. What about the government? Have they come on board yet?" Jenna paused, clearly hesitant. "They're still cautious. They've promised to continue funding for the initial phase, but they're waiting to see long-term results before committing further." Emily exchanged a glance with Elon. They had anticipated this resistance. It was always going to take time for governments to fully embrace such an unconventional approach. The idea of empowering local communities rather than relying on government-run programs was a hard sell for many politicians, especially in places where bureaucratic systems were deeply entrenched. "It's going to take more than just good results to get them on board," Emily said, a sense of determination in her voice. "We'll need to show them that this isn't just about solving homelessness, it's about building a future that benefits everyone. We can't just be an experiment anymore. We need to be a solution." Elon agreed. "We need to prove that our model works at scale. We need to show them how it can be integrated with existing systems, how it can reduce crime, improve education, and boost local economies. We need to turn the narrative around." In the following weeks, Elon and Emily took their mission to the next level. They began focusing on building strategic relationships with key influencers within the South African government and beyond. They met with local mayors, education leaders, business executives, and international NGOs who could play a pivotal role in strengthening the program's position. At the same time, they ramped up their efforts to involve the communities themselves. They began organizing town hall meetings, hosting workshops, and creating spaces for people to share their ideas and concerns. It was crucial to demonstrate that this wasn't just about imposing a solution from the top down, it was about empowering people to take ownership of their own futures. One afternoon, they attended a community event in a neighborhood just outside Cape Town. The streets were filled with people, the air buzzing with excitement. It was a celebration of the first group of individuals who had successfully completed the program and found stable employment and housing. As they walked through the event, a young man approached them. His face was familiar, he was one of the first residents to join the program. His name was David, and he had been homeless for nearly 5 years before entering the community. "Mr. Musk, Ms. Emily," David greeted them, his voice full of gratitude. "I just wanted to thank you for everything. Without this program, I don't know where I'd be right now. I'm working now, I've got a job at a local tech company. I've got my own apartment, and I'm starting to rebuild my life." Elon's eyes softened as he shook David's hand. "You've done the hard work, David. We're just here to give you the tools to succeed." David smiled, his eyes shining with hope. "No, you don't understand. This isn't just a program. It's a second chance. You gave me something I thought I'd lost forever." The conversation was a powerful reminder of why they had started this journey. It wasn't about numbers or statistics, it was about people. People like David, who had been written off by society, but who were now thriving because someone had believed in them. As the event continued, Elon and Emily made their way to the stage to give a speech. The crowd was enthusiastic, the energy infectious. But as they stood there, speaking to the hundreds of residents gathered before them, they couldn't help but feel the weight of their mission. They were just one part of a much larger puzzle, a puzzle that spanned continents and cultures, that involved millions of lives. Later that night, as Elon and Emily reflected on the day, the sense of responsibility seemed heavier than ever. They had witnessed firsthand the transformative power of their program, but the road ahead was still full of obstacles. We're on the edge of something huge, Emily said, her voice filled with resolve. But the challenge is making sure it sticks. Making sure this movement isn't just a flash in the pan. Elon sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know. We've got so much to prove, not just to governments, but to the world. People have already invested so much in us, and now we've got to show them it's worth it. This is the moment we either rise or fall. Emily's gaze was steady. We'll rise. We've already changed lives. And we'll keep changing them. But as they sat in silence, the weight of their global mission pressing down on them, neither of them could deny that they were standing at a crossroads. The choices they made in the coming months would determine the fate of the program, and perhaps the fate of millions of people who had never had a voice. And as they looked toward the future, they knew one thing for sure: the real work was just beginning. Months had passed since their initial launch in Cape Town, and Elon and Emily found themselves at the epicenter of a global movement. What had started as a small, grassroots initiative was now something much larger, an international effort, poised to challenge the very foundations of how the world approached homelessness. But the more they expanded, the more they realized how fragile their success could be. Every day felt like a delicate balancing act, fighting for resources, for political support, for community buy-in. They were no longer just fighting for survival, they were fighting for legitimacy on a global scale. In the weeks after the Cape Town launch, Elon and Emily had been traveling non-stop. They were in Brazil one day, meeting with local business owners in Sao Paulo, then in India the next, navigating the complex political landscape to build partnerships in Mumbai and New Delhi. But no matter where they went, the pressures of scaling their program weighed heavily on them. It wasn't just the logistics of building more communities, it was the growing sense that they were about to face a monumental turning point in the project's journey. One misstep, and it could all unravel. As success in one country led to demands for the program in others, they needed to prove they could deliver on their promises. In late summer, Elon and Emily found themselves in Rio de Janeiro, attending a series of meetings with government officials. The government in Brazil had been cautious in supporting their efforts, reluctant to commit to large-scale funding until they could see more substantial evidence of the model's long-term success. Elon stared out the window of the meeting room, his thoughts racing. The weight of this decision, the tipping point, was suffocating. If they couldn't secure the proper funding in Brazil, it would send a message to the rest of the world that their initiative wasn't as viable as they had hoped. Emily sat next to him, silently watching the bustling city below. "What do you think?" she asked quietly, sensing his hesitation. Elon rubbed his eyes, exhaustion lining his face. "I think we're at a crossroads. If we don't get the support here, we're going to have a hard time convincing anyone else. This is a make-or-break moment." Emily placed her hand on his arm. "We've come too far to give up now. We've changed lives, Elon. We've already done the hard part. Now we just need to keep showing up, every single day, to make sure this works." Elon gave her a small, appreciative smile. "I know. But it's not just about us anymore. It's about everyone who's invested in this. The people who are counting on us to deliver." The day of their final presentation to the Brazilian government arrived. The atmosphere in the room was tense, filled with uncertainty. Elon and Emily were joined by local leaders who had already seen the impact of the program in their own communities, hoping to sway the government's decision. But even as they spoke, they could feel the skepticism in the room. Government officials raised concerns about long-term costs, the sustainability of the model, and whether it could truly scale to meet Brazil's vast needs. Every question felt like a challenge, a barrier they had to break down. Emily stood up after Elon's presentation, her voice calm but firm. "We understand the concerns. We know this isn't easy, but we've seen what this model can do. We've seen lives transformed. This isn't just an experiment, it's a proven solution. But to make it work, we need you. We need the government, the businesses, and the communities to come together and believe in it. There was a long silence in the room before one of the officials spoke up. What guarantees do we have that this will work in the long term? What if it doesn't? Elon leaned forward, his voice unwavering. I can't guarantee that it will be easy. But I can guarantee that we will work tirelessly to make it work. This program isn't just about us, it's about the people who have been forgotten, the people who have been left behind. And if we don't act now, how can we look ourselves in the mirror? There was another long silence, and then, one by one, the officials began to nod, understanding the gravity of what was at stake. Finally, the head of the committee spoke. We will support you. We'll help you expand, we'll help fund this initiative, and we'll make sure it works for Brazil. Elon and Emily exchanged a glance, relief washing over them. They had done it. The tipping point had been reached. But as they walked out of the meeting, the weight of what they had just accomplished still felt heavy. Yes, they had secured the funding they needed in Brazil, but that was only one piece of the puzzle. The real work was still ahead. You know what this means, right? Elon said as they walked through the hallway of the government building. Emily nodded, her expression determined. It means we've got to deliver. We can't afford to fail now. We have to prove that this model works at scale. Not just in Brazil, but everywhere else. And she was right. This was no longer just about expanding their initiative, it was about proving to the world that their program was the solution, not just a temporary fix. Every city they entered, every country they worked with, was now a test. They couldn't afford to fall short. A week later, as they flew back to the United States, Elon and Emily reflected on the monumental shifts they had experienced. Their program was now not just a local success but an international movement. Governments, businesses, and individuals from around the world were starting to take notice. Yet, there was still much work to be done. The next phase of their journey would require not just a new level of commitment but a shift in mindset. They would have to inspire millions, push through the inevitable challenges, and maintain their momentum no matter how steep the climb. As the plane descended over the horizon, the lights of their home city below twinkling in the distance, Elon turned to Emily. We've reached a new stage in this. But now we need to show everyone what we can do. Emily smiled, her eyes gleaming with a quiet but undeniable confidence. We will. And we won't stop until it's done. The world was watching now. And nothing, it seemed, could stop them from reaching the next tipping point, where their dream of ending homelessness on a global scale would become reality. The months following their victory in Brazil were some of the busiest Elon and Emily had ever experienced. The program had gained unprecedented international recognition, and with each new partnership, the stakes grew higher. They were no longer just leading a project, they were at the forefront of a global transformation. The demands were relentless. Meetings with world leaders, corporate partners, and philanthropists consumed their days. Yet, even as they navigated this whirlwind of activity, there was always a part of them that longed for something more. They had built a foundation for change, but it was only the beginning. The road ahead remained uncertain. As they sat in a conference room one crisp autumn morning, the walls lined with maps and data projections, the enormity of their mission seemed almost surreal. The goal to end homelessness worldwide no longer felt like an idealistic dream, it was becoming a tangible reality. But as with any ambitious vision, the greater the success, the larger the obstacles. Emily, Elon said, staring at a map of global initiatives on the wall. We've reached every continent now. The groundwork is there, but it's still so fragile. I can feel it. This whole movement is one crisis away from unraveling. Emily didn't look at him immediately. Instead, her eyes traced the lines of the map. She knew exactly what Elon was talking about. The model they had developed was complex, interdependent on local systems, global cooperation, and a vast network of supporters. One major disruption, political unrest, financial collapse, or even something as simple as a natural disaster, could send everything into disarray. I know, she said quietly. But we've come this far. We've already weathered so many storms. Every challenge we've faced has made us stronger. This isn't just about the program, it's about something much bigger. We're showing the world that change is possible. Elon nodded, though his mind was far from settled. It's not enough to just keep going. We need to think about sustainability in a way we haven't yet. How do we make sure this movement doesn't depend on us? How do we make sure it keeps growing even when we're not around? Emily leaned forward, her expression resolute. We don't just need to lead the way. We need to inspire others to take the reins. Local leaders, businesses, organizations, people who believe in this vision and who will take ownership. This can't be a top-down model forever. It has to be decentralized. Elon thought about that for a moment, nodding slowly. You're right. If we truly want this to last, it can't be about us. It has to be about the people. As they moved forward, they began focusing on empowering local communities even more. They held workshops and leadership training programs, teaching others how to become champions for change in their own neighborhoods. They partnered with local governments, helping them integrate their model into existing infrastructure. Slowly but surely, the initiative was evolving from an idea to a global movement that didn't rely solely on the efforts of Elon and Emily. They saw this shift most clearly during their next stop, Bangladesh. In Dhaka, they had been working with local leaders to build homes for the homeless, but the country faced enormous challenges, an ever-growing population, limited resources, and political instability. Elon and Emily could see how hard the local leaders were working, but they also knew the uphill battle they were facing. During a meeting with a group of influential business leaders, Elon presented a proposal, a partnership model where businesses could play a larger role in funding and maintaining the housing initiatives, both as a form of social responsibility and a means to stimulate economic growth. We're not asking you to just donate, Elon explained, his voice calm but firm. We're asking you to invest in the future of your country. This program will create jobs, build communities, and give your employees and customers something to believe in. You'll be part of a movement that's changing the way the world views homelessness. The room was quiet as the businessmen and women considered his words. Then, one by one, they nodded in agreement. It was a breakthrough moment, not just for the project, but for the way the world was starting to view social responsibility. This was the future that Elon and Emily had envisioned, a world where everyone took ownership of the problem, where businesses, governments, and communities worked together to solve the issue of homelessness. The next year was a whirlwind of growth and progress. As their program spread across continents, the results became undeniable. In cities from Lagos to Buenos Aires, from Mumbai to New York, the impact of their work was visible. Once forgotten communities were thriving, people were finding jobs, and homelessness rates were plummeting. Yet, for all their success, Elon and Emily remained focused on the future. They knew the real work had just begun. They had proven that change was possible, but now they had to make sure that it could endure. They began researching ways to make the program even more efficient, using technology to track and analyze data, finding ways to lower costs, and improving the long-term sustainability of their model. Every step was geared toward the future, toward the next stage of their mission. But even as they worked to build a lasting legacy, they never lost sight of the people at the heart of it all. They continued to visit the communities they had helped create, meeting with the individuals whose lives had been transformed. They listened to their stories, celebrated their victories, and offered support in ways they hadn't before. One evening, while in New York, they visited a small family in a housing development they had built. The family had been homeless for years before entering the program, and now they were flourishing. The parents had stable jobs, the children were excelling in school, and the family had dreams for their future that no longer felt impossible. "This is what it's all about," Emily said softly as she stood in their living room, watching the children play in the corner. Elon nodded, a rare smile on his face. It's easy to get caught up in the bigger picture. But moments like this remind me why we're doing all of this. It's not just about statistics. It's about real people. Real lives. As the years passed, the vision they had set in motion continued to evolve. They had reached a point where the program was self-sustaining. Local communities had taken full ownership, governments had invested in long-term solutions, and businesses had recognized the economic value of supporting the cause. Elon and Emily had built something that had outgrown them, something that was now carried forward by an entire generation of leaders and changemakers. But as they sat together one evening, looking out over a city that had been transformed, they knew that their work was never truly done. There would always be more challenges to face, more people to help, and more communities to rebuild. The future, while uncertain, was full of endless possibilities. And as they looked toward the horizon, one thing was clear: the story of homelessness, and the world's effort to eradicate it, was still being written. And Elon Musk and Emily had no intention of stopping until it was a story with a happy ending. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?